Welcome back to Driven to Win. Today we continue our full audiobook series, Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Let's begin the story. Part 3, Chapter 1. Raskolnikov got up and sat down on the sofa. He waved his hand weakly to Razumin to cut short the flow of warm and incoherent consolations he was addressing to his mother and sister, took them both by the hand, and for a minute or two gazed from one to the other without speaking. His mother was alarmed by his expression. It revealed an emotion agonizingly poignant, and at the same time something immovable, almost insane. Pulcheria Alexandrovna began to cry. Avdotya Romanovna was pale. Her hand trembled in her brother's. "Go home with him," he said in a broken voice, pointing to Razumin. "Goodbye till tomorrow. Tomorrow everything. Is it long since you arrived?" "This evening, Rodia," answered Pulcheria Alexandrovna. "The train was awfully late. But, Rodia, nothing would induce me to leave you now. I will spend the night here near you. Don't torture me," he said with a gesture of irritation. "I will stay with him," cried Razumin. "I won't leave him for a moment. Bother all my visitors. Let them rage to their heart's content. My uncle is presiding there. How can I thank you?" Pulcheria Alexandrovna was beginning, once more pressing Razumin's hands, but Raskolnikov interrupted her again. "I can't have it. I can't have it," he repeated irritably. "Don't worry me. Enough. Go away. I can't stand it. Come, Mama. Come out of the room at least for a minute," Dunya whispered in dismay. "We are distressing him. That's evident. Mayn't I look at him after 3 years?" wept Pulcheria Alexandrovna. "Stay." He stopped them again. "You keep interrupting me, and my ideas get muddled. Have you seen Luzin?" "No, Rodia. But he knows already of our arrival." "We have heard, Rodia, that Pyotr Petrovitch was so kind as to visit you today." Pulcheria Alexandrovna added somewhat timidly. "Yes, he was so kind. Dunya, I promised Luzin I'd throw him downstairs and told him go to hell." "Rodia, what are you saying? Surely, you don't mean to tell us?" Pulcheria Alexandrovna began in alarm, but she stopped, looking at Dunya. Avdotya Romanovna was looking attentively at her brother, waiting for what would come next. Both of them had heard of the quarrel from Nastasia. So far she had succeeded in understanding and reporting it, and were in painful perplexity and suspense. "Dunya," Raskolnikov continued with an effort, "I don't want that marriage. So at the first opportunity tomorrow you must refuse Luzin, so that we may never hear his name again." "Good heavens!" cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna. "Brother, think what you are saying." Avdotya Romanovna began impetuously, but immediately checked herself. "You are not fit to talk now. Perhaps you are tired," she added gently. "You think I am delirious? No, you are marrying Luzin for my sake. But I won't accept the sacrifice, and so write a letter before tomorrow to refuse him. Let me read it in the morning, and that will be the end of it." "That I can't do," the girl cried, offended. "What right have you—" "Dunya, you are hasty, too. Be quiet. Tomorrow—" "Don't you see?" The mother interposed in dismay. "Better come away." "He is raving," Razumin cried tipsily. "Or how would he dare? Tomorrow all this nonsense will be over. Today he certainly did drive him away. That was so. And Luzin got angry, too. He made speeches here, wanted to show off his learning, and he went out crestfallen. Then it's true," cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna. "Goodbye till tomorrow, brother," said Dunya compassionately. "Let us go, mother. Goodbye, Rodia." "Do you hear, sister?" he repeated after them, making a last effort. "I am not delirious. This marriage is an infamy. Let me act like a scoundrel, but you mustn't. One is enough. And though I am a scoundrel, I wouldn't own such a sister. It's me or Luzin. Go now, but you're out of your mind." "Despot!" roared Razumin. But Raskolnikov did not, and perhaps could not, answer. He lay down on the sofa and turned to the wall, utterly exhausted. Avdotya Romanovna looked with interest at Razumin. Her black eyes flashed. Razumin positively started at her glance. Pulcheria Alexandrovna stood overwhelmed. "Nothing would induce me to go," she whispered in despair to Razumihin. I will stay somewhere here. Escort Dunya home. You'll spoil everything. Razumihin answered in the same whisper, losing patience. Come out onto the stairs, anyway. Nastasia, show a light. I assure you, he went on in a half-whisper on the stairs, that he was almost beating the doctor and me this afternoon. Do you understand? The doctor himself. Even he gave way and left him, so as not to irritate him. I remained downstairs on guard, but he dressed at once and slipped off, and he will slip off again if you irritate him at this time of night and will do himself some mischief. What are you saying? And Avdotya Romanovna can't possibly be left in those lodgings without you. Just think where you are staying. That blackguard Pyotr Petrovitch couldn't find you better lodgings. But you know I've had a little to drink, and that's what makes me swear don't mind it. But I'll go to the landlady here. Pulcheria Alexandrovna insisted. I'll beseech her to find some corner for Dunya and me for the night. I can't leave him like that. I cannot. This conversation took place on the landing just before the landlady's door. Nastasia lighted them from a step below. Razumihin was in extraordinary excitement. Half an hour earlier, while he was bringing Raskolnikov home, he had indeed talked too freely, but he was aware of it himself, and his head was clear in spite of the vast quantities he had imbibed. Now he was in a state bordering on ecstasy, and all that he had drunk seemed to fly to his head with redoubled effect. He stood with the two ladies, seizing both by their hands, persuading them, and giving them reasons with astonishing plainness of speech. At almost every word he uttered, probably to emphasize his arguments, he squeezed their hands painfully as in a vice. He stared at Avdotya Romanovna, without the least regard for good manners. They sometimes pulled their hands out of his huge bony paws, but far from noticing what was the matter, he drew them all the closer to him. If they had told him to jump head foremost on the staircase, he would have done it without thought or hesitation in their service. Though Pulcheria Alexandrovna felt that the young man was really too eccentric and pinched her hand too much, in her anxiety over her Rhodia she looked on his presence as providential, and was unwilling to notice all his peculiarities. But though Avdotya Romanovna shared her anxiety and was not of timorous disposition, she could not see the glowing light in his eyes without wonder and almost alarm. It was only the unbounded confidence inspired by Nastasia's account of her brother's queer friend which prevented her from trying to run away from him and to persuade her mother to do the same. She realized, too, that even running away was perhaps impossible now. 10 minutes later, however, she was considerably reassured. It was characteristic of Razumihin that he showed his true nature at once, whatever mood he might be in, so that people quickly saw the sort of man they had to deal with. You can't go to the landlady. That's perfect nonsense, he cried. If you stay, though you are his mother, you'll drive him to a frenzy, and then goodness knows what will happen. Listen, I'll tell you what I'll do. Nastasia will stay with him now, and I'll conduct you both home. You can't be in the streets alone. Petersburg is an awful place in that way. But no matter. Then I'll run straight back here. And a quarter of an hour later, on my word of honor, I'll bring you news how he is, whether he is asleep, and all that. Then listen. Then I'll run home in a twinkling. I've a lot of friends there, all drunk. I'll fetch Zosimov. That's the doctor who is looking after him. He is there, too, but he is not drunk. He is not drunk. He is never drunk. I'll drag him to Rhodia, and then to you, so that you'll get 2 reports in the hour. From the doctor, you understand, from the doctor himself. That's a very different thing from my account of him. If there's anything wrong, I swear I'll bring you here myself. But if it's all right, you go to bed, and I'll spend the night here, in the passage. He won't hear me, and I'll tell Zosimov to sleep at the landlady's, to be a hand, which is better for him. You are the doctor, so come home then. But the landlady is out of the question. It's all right for me, but it's out of the question for you. She wouldn't take you, for she's a fool. She'd be jealous on my account of Avdotya Romanovna and of you, too, if you want to know, of Avdotya Romanovna certainly. She is an absolutely unaccountable character. But I am a fool, too. No matter. Come along. Do you trust me? Come, do you trust me or not? Let us go, mother, said Avdotya Romanovna. He will certainly do what he has promised. He has saved Rhodia already, and if the doctor really will consent to spend the night here, what could be better? You see, you understand me, because you are an angel. Razumihin cried in ecstasy. Let us go. Nastasia, fly upstairs and sit with him with the light. I'll come in a quarter of an hour. Though Pulcheria Alexandrovna was not perfectly convinced, she made no further resistance. Razumihin gave an arm to each and drew them down the stairs. He still made her uneasy, as though he was competent and good-natured. Was he capable of carrying out his promise? He seemed in such a condition. Ah, I see you think I am in such a condition. Razumihin broke in upon her thoughts, guessing them, as he strode along the pavement with huge steps, so that the two ladies could hardly keep up with him, a fact he did not observe, however. Nonsense. That is, I am drunk like a fool, but that's not it. I am not drunk from wine. It's seeing you has turned my head. But don't mind me. Don't take any notice. I am talking nonsense. I am not worthy of you. I am utterly unworthy of you. The minute I've taken you home, I'll pour a couple of pailfuls of water over my head in the gutter here, and then I shall be all right. If only you knew how I love you both. Don't laugh, and don't be angry. You may be angry with anyone, but not with me. I am his friend, and therefore I am your friend, too. I had a presentiment. Last year there was a moment, though it wasn't a presentiment really, for you seem to have fallen from heaven, and I expect I shan't sleep all night. Zosimov was afraid a little time ago that he would go mad. That's why he mustn't be irritated. What do you say? Cried the mother. Did the doctor really say that? Asked Avdotya Romanovna, alarmed. Yes, but it's not so, not a bit of it. He gave him some medicine, a powder, I saw it, and then you're coming here. Ah, it would have been better if you had come tomorrow. It's a good thing we went away. And in an hour Zosimov himself will report to you about everything. He is not drunk, and I shan't be drunk. And what made me get so tight? Because they got me into an argument. Damn them. I've sworn never to argue. They talk such trash. I almost came to blows. I've left my uncle to preside. Would you believe they insist on complete absence of individualism, and that's just what they relish. Not to be themselves, to be as unlike themselves as they can. That's what they regard as the highest point of progress. If only their nonsense were their own, but as it is, listen. Pulcheria Alexandrovna interrupted timidly, but it only added fuel to the flames. What do you think? Shouted Razumihin, louder than ever. You think I'm attacking them for talking nonsense? Not a bit. I like them to talk nonsense. That's man's one privilege over all creation. Through error you come to the truth. I am a man because I err. You never reach any truth without making 14 mistakes, and very likely 114. And a fine thing, too, in its way. But we can't even make mistakes on our own account. Talk nonsense, but talk your own. Nonsense, and I'll kiss you for it. To go wrong in one's own way is better than to go right in someone else's. In the first case, you are a man. In the second, you're no better than a bird. Truth won't escape you, but life can be cramped. There have been examples. And what are we doing now? In science, development, thought, invention, ideals, aims, liberalism, judgment, experience, and everything, we are still in the preparatory class at school. We prefer to live on other people's ideas. It's what we are used to. Am I right? Cried Razumihin, pressing and shaking the two ladies' hands. Oh, mercy, I do not know, cried poor Pulcheria Alexandrovna. Yes, though I don't agree with you in everything, added Avdotya Romanovna earnestly, and at once uttered a cry, for he squeezed her hand so painfully. Yes, you say yes. Well, after that he cried in a transport, you are a fount of goodness, purity, sense, and perfection. Give me your hand. You give me yours, too. I want to kiss your hands here at once, on my knees. And he fell on his knees on the pavement, fortunately at that time deserted. Leave off. I entreat you, what are you doing? Pulcheria Alexandrovna cried, greatly distressed. Get up, said Dunya laughing, though she too was upset. Not for anything till you let me kiss your hands. That's it. Enough. I get up and we'll go on. I am a luckless fool. I am unworthy of you and drunk, and I am ashamed. I am not worthy to love you. But to do homage to you is a duty of every man who is not a perfect beast. And I've done homage. Here are your lodgings. And for that alone, Rhoda was right in driving your Fyodor Petrovitch away. How dare he? How dare he put you in such lodgings? It's a scandal. Do you know the sort of people they take in here? And you as betrothed. You are his betrothed? Yes? Well then, I'll tell you, your fiancé is a scoundrel. Excuse me, Mr. Razumihin, you are forgetting. Pulcheria Alexandrovna was beginning. Yes, you are right. I did forget myself. I'm ashamed of it. Razumihin made haste to apologize. But you can't be angry with me for speaking so. For I speak sincerely and not because HM, that would be disgraceful. In fact, not because I'm in HM. Well, anyway, I won't say why I daren't. But we all saw today when he came in that man is not of our sort. Not because he had his hair curled at the barber's. Not because he was in such a hurry to show his wit, but because he is a spy, a speculator. Because he is a skinflint and a buffoon. That's evident. Do you think him clever? No, he is a fool. And is he a match for you? Good heavens! Do you see, ladies? He stopped suddenly on the way upstairs to their rooms. Though all my friends are drunk, yet they're all honest. And though we do talk a lot of trash, and I do, too, yet we shall talk our way to truth at last. For we are on the right path, while Fyodor Petrovitch is not on the right path. Though I've been calling him all sorts of names just now, I do respect them all. Though I don't respect Zametov, I like him, for he is a puppy, and that bullock Zosimov, because he is an honest man and knows his work. But enough, it's all said and forgiven. Is it forgiven? Well, then let's go on. I know this corridor. I've been here. There was a scandal here at number 3. Were you here? Which number? 8? Well, lock yourselves in for the night. Then, don't let anybody in. In a quarter of an hour I'll come back with news, and half an hour later I'll bring Zosimov, you'll see. Goodbye, I'll run. Good heavens, Dunya, what is going to happen? Said Pulcheria Alexandrovna, addressing her daughter with anxiety and dismay. Don't worry yourself, mother, said Dunya, taking off her hat and cape. God has sent this gentleman to our aid, though he has come from a drinking party. We can depend on him, I assure you, and all that is done for Rhodia. Ah, Dunya, goodness knows whether he will come. How could I bring myself to leave Rhodia? And how different I had fancied our meeting. How sullen he was, as though not pleased to see us. Tears came into her eyes. No, it's not that, mother. You didn't see. You were crying all the time. He is quite unhinged by serious illness. That's the reason. Ah, that illness. What will happen? And how he talked to you. Dunya, said the mother, looking timidly at her daughter, tried to read her thoughts, and already half consoled by Dunya's standing up for her brother, which meant that she had already forgiven him. I am sure he will think better of it tomorrow, she added, probing her further. And I am sure that he will say the same tomorrow about that. Avdotya Romanovna said finally, and of course there was no going beyond that, for this was a point which Pulcheria Alexandrovna was afraid to discuss. Dunya went up and kissed her mother. The latter warmly embraced her without speaking. Then she sat down to wait anxiously for Razumihin's return, timidly watching her daughter, who walked up and down the room with her arms folded, lost in thought. This walking up and down when she was thinking was a habit of Avdotya Romanovna's, and the mother was always afraid to break in on her daughter's mood at such moments. Razumihin, of course, was ridiculous in his sudden drunken infatuation for Avdotya Romanovna, yet apart from his eccentric condition. Many people would have thought it justified if they had seen Avdotya Romanovna, especially at that moment when she was walking to and fro with folded arms, pensive and melancholy. Avdotya Romanovna was remarkably good-looking. She was tall, strikingly well-proportioned, strong and self-reliant. The latter quality was apparent in every gesture, though it did not in the least detract from the grace and softness of her movements. In face, she resembled her brother, but she might be described as really beautiful. Her hair was dark brown, a little lighter than her brother's. There was a proud light in her almost black eyes, and yet at times a look of extraordinary kindness. She was pale, but it was a healthy pallor. Her face was radiant with freshness and vigor. Her mouth was rather small. The full red lower lip projected a little, as did her chin. It was the only irregularity in her beautiful face, but it gave it peculiarly individual and almost haughty expression. Her face was always more serious and thoughtful than gay, but how well smiles, how well youthful, light-hearted, irresponsible laughter suited her face. It was natural enough that a warm, open, simple-hearted, honest giant like Razumihin, who had never seen anyone like her and was not quite sober at the time, should lose his head immediately. Besides, as chance would have it, he saw Dunya for the first time transfigured by her love for her brother and her joy at meeting him. Afterwards he saw her lower lip quiver with indignation at her brother's insolent, cruel, and ungrateful words, and his fate was sealed. He had spoken the truth, moreover, when he blurted out his drunken talk on the stairs that Praskovia Pavlovna, Raskolnikov's eccentric landlady, would be jealous of Pulcheria Alexandrovna as well as of Avdotya Romanovna on his account. Although Pulcheria Alexandrovna was 43, her face still retained traces of her former beauty. She looked much younger than her age, indeed, which is almost always the case with women who retain serenity of spirit, sensitiveness, and pure, sincere warmth of heart to old age. We may add in parenthesis that to preserve all this is the only means of retaining beauty to old age. Her hair had begun to grow gray and thin. There had long been little crow's foot wrinkles round her eyes. Her cheeks were hollow and sunken from anxiety and grief, and yet it was a handsome face. She was Dunya over. Again, 20 years older, but without the projecting under lip. Pulcheria Alexandrovna was emotional, but not sentimental, timid and yielding, but only to a certain point. She could give way and accept a great deal even of what was contrary to her convictions, but there was a certain barrier fixed by honesty, principle, and the deepest convictions which nothing would induce her to cross. Exactly 20 minutes after Razumihin's departure, there came 2 subdued but hurried knocks at the door. He had come back. "I won't come in. I haven't time," he hastened to say when the door was opened. "He sleeps like a top, soundly, quietly, and God grant he may sleep 10 hours. Nastasia's with him. I told her not to leave till I came. Now I am fetching Zosimov. He will report to you, and then you'd better turn in. I can see you are too tired to do anything." And he ran off down the corridor. "What a very competent and devoted young man!" cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna, exceedingly delighted. "He seems a splendid person." Avdotya Romanovna replied with some warmth, resuming her walk up and down the room. It was nearly an hour later when they heard footsteps in the corridor and another knock at the door. Both women waited this time, completely relying on Razumihin's promise. He actually had succeeded in bringing Zosimov. Zosimov had agreed at once to desert the drinking party, to go to Raskolnikov's, but he came reluctantly and with the greatest suspicion to see the ladies, mistrusting Razumihin in his exhilarated condition, but his vanity was at once reassured and flattered. He saw that they were really expecting him as an oracle. He stayed just 10 minutes and succeeded in completely convincing and comforting Pulcheria Alexandrovna. He spoke with marked sympathy, but with the reserve and extreme seriousness of a young doctor at an important consultation. He did not utter a word on any other subject and did not display the slightest desire to enter into more personal relations with the 2 ladies. Remarking at his first entrance the dazzling beauty of Avdotya Romanovna, he endeavored not to notice her at all during his visit, and addressed himself solely to Pulcheria Alexandrovna. All this gave him extraordinary inward satisfaction. He declared that he thought the invalid at this moment going on very satisfactorily. According to his observations, the patient's illness was due partly to his unfortunate material surroundings during the last few months, but had partly also a moral origin, was, so to speak, the product of several material and moral influences, anxieties, apprehensions, troubles, certain ideas, and so on. Noticing stealthily that Avdotya Romanovna was following his words with close attention, Zosimov allowed himself to enlarge on this theme. On Pulcheria Alexandrovna's anxiously and timidly inquiring as to some suspicion of insanity, he replied with composed and candid smile that his words had been exaggerated, that certainly the patient had some fixed idea, something approaching a monomania. Zosimov was now particularly studying this interesting branch of medicine, but that it must be recollected that until today the patient had been in delirium and that no doubt the presence of his family would have a favorable effect on his recovery and distract his mind. If only all fresh shocks can be avoided, he added significantly. Then he got up, took leave with an impressive and affable bow, while blessings, warm gratitude, and entreaties were showered upon him, and Avdotya Romanovna spontaneously offered her hand to him. He went out exceedingly pleased with his visit, and still more so with himself. "We'll talk tomorrow. Go to bed at once." Razumihin said in conclusion, following Zosimov out, "I'll be with you tomorrow morning, as early as possible with my report." "That's a fetching little girl, Avdotya Romanovna," remarked Zosimov, almost licking his lips as they both came out into the street. "Fetching? You said fetching?" roared Razumihin, and he flew at Zosimov and seized him by the throat. "If you ever dare—" "Do you understand? Do you understand?" he shouted, shaking him by the collar and squeezing him against the wall. "Do you hear?" "Let me go, you drunken devil," said Zosimov, struggling when it let him go. He stared at him and went off into a sudden guffaw. Razumihin stood facing him in gloomy and earnest reflection. "Of course I am an ass," he observed, somber as a storm cloud. "But still, you are another—" "No, brother, not at all such another. I am not dreaming of any folly." They walked along in silence, and only when they were close to Raskolnikov's lodgings, Razumihin broke the silence in considerable anxiety. "Listen," he said. "You're a first-rate fellow, but among your other failings, you're a loose fish that I know, and a dirty one, too. You are a feeble, nervous wretch, and a mass of whims. You're getting fat, and lazy, and can't deny yourself anything. And I call that dirty, because it leads one straight into the dirt. You've let yourself get so slack that I don't know how it is you are still a good, even a devoted doctor. You, a doctor, sleep on a feather bed and get up at night to your patients. In another 3 or 4 years you won't get up for your patients. But hang it all, that's not the point. You're going to spend tonight in the landlady's flat here. Hard work I've had to persuade her. And I'll be in the kitchen. So here's a chance for you to get to know her better. It's not as you think. There's not a trace of anything of the sort, brother. But I don't think. Here you have modesty, brother, silence, bashfulness, a savage virtue, and yet she's sighing and melting like wax. Simply melting. Save me from her, by all that's unholy. She's most prepossessing. I'll repay you, I'll do anything." Zosimov laughed more violently than ever. "Well, you are smitten, but what am I to do with her? It won't be much trouble, I assure you. Talk any rot you like to her, as long as you sit by her and talk. You're a doctor, too. Try curing her of something. I swear you won't regret it. She has a piano, and you know, I strum a little. I have a song there, a genuine Russian one. I shed hot tears. She likes a genuine article, and well, it all began with that song. Now you're a regular performer, a maitre, a Rubinstein. I assure you, you won't regret it. But have you made her some promise? Something signed? A promise of marriage, perhaps?" Nothing, absolutely nothing of the kind. Besides, she is not that sort at all. Chebarov tried that. Well then, drop her. But I can't drop her like that. Why can't you? Well, I can't. That's all about it. There's an element of attraction here, brother. Then why have you fascinated her? I haven't fascinated her. Perhaps I was fascinated myself in my folly. But she won't care a straw. Whether it's you or I, so long as somebody sits beside her, sighing. I can't explain the position, brother. Look here. You are good at mathematics and working at it now. Begin teaching her the integral calculus. Upon my soul, I'm not joking. I'm in earnest. It'll be just the same to her. She will gaze at you and sigh for a whole year together. I talked to her once for 2 days at a time about the Prussian House of Lords, for one must talk of something. She just sighed and perspired. And you mustn't talk of love. She's bashful to hysterics. But just let her see you can't tear yourself away. That's enough. It's fearfully comfortable. You're quite at home. You can read, sit, lie about right. You may even venture on a kiss if you're careful. But what do I want with her? H, I can't make you understand. You see, you are made for each other. I have often been reminded of you. You'll come to it in the end. So does it matter whether it's sooner or later? There's a feather bed. Element here, brother. H, and not only that, there's an attraction here. Here you have the end of the world, an anchorage, a quiet haven, the navel of the earth. The three fishes are the foundation of the world, the essence of pancakes, of savory fish pies, of the evening samovar, of soft sighs and warm shawls and hot stoves to sleep on, as snug as though you were dead, and yet you're alive. The advantages of both at once. Well, hang it, brother, what stuff I'm talking, it's bedtime. Listen, I sometimes wake up at night, so I'll go in and look at him. But there's no need, it's all right. Don't you worry yourself. Yet if you like, you might just look in once, too. But if you notice anything, delirium or fever, wake me at once. But there can't be. Chapter 2. Razumihin waked up next morning at 8 o'clock, troubled and serious. He found himself confronted with many new and unlooked-for perplexities. He had never expected that he would ever wake up feeling like that. He remembered every detail of the previous day, and he knew that a perfectly novel experience had befallen him, that he received an impression unlike anything he had known before. At the same time, he recognized clearly that the dream which had fired his imagination was hopelessly unattainable. So unattainable that he felt positively ashamed of it, and he hastened to pass to the other more practical cares and difficulties bequeathed him by that thrice accursed yesterday. The most awful recollection of the previous day was the way he had shown himself base and mean, not only because he had been drunk, but because he had taken advantage of the young girl's position to abuse her fiancé in his stupid jealousy, knowing nothing of their mutual relations and obligations, and next to nothing of the man himself. And what right had he to criticize him in that hasty and unguarded manner? Who had asked for his opinion? Was it thinkable that such a creature as Avdotya Romanovna would be marrying an unworthy man for money? So there must be something in him. The lodgings? But after all, how could he know the character of the lodgings? He was furnishing a flat. Phoo! How despicable it all was. And what justification was it that he was drunk? Such a stupid excuse was even more degrading. In wine is truth, and the truth had all come out. That is, all the uncleanness of his coarse and envious heart. And would such a dream ever be permissible to him? Razumihin? What was he beside? Such a girl. He, the drunken, noisy bragger of last night? Was it possible to imagine so absurd and cynical a juxtaposition? Razumihin blushed desperately at the very idea, and suddenly the recollection forced itself vividly upon him of how he had said last night on the stairs that the landlady would be jealous of Avdotya Romanovna. That was simply intolerable. He brought his fist down heavily on the kitchen stove, hurt his hand, and sent one of the bricks flying. Of course, he muttered to himself a minute later with a feeling of self-abasement. Of course, all these infamies can never be wiped out or smoothed over, and so it's useless even to think of it, and I must go to them in silence and do my duty in silence too, and not ask forgiveness and say nothing, for all is lost now. And yet as he dressed, he examined his attire more carefully than usual. He hadn't another suit. If he had, perhaps he wouldn't have put it on. I would have made a point of not putting it on. But in any case, he could not remain a cynic and a dirty sloven. He had no right to offend the feelings of others, especially when they were in need of his assistance and asking him to see them. He brushed his clothes carefully. His linen was always decent. In that respect, he was especially clean. He washed that morning scrupulously. He got some soap from Nastasia. He washed his hair, his neck, and especially his hands. When it came to the question whether to shave his stubbly chin or not, Praskovia Pavlovna had capital razors that had been left by her late husband. The question was angrily answered in the negative. Let it stay as it is. What if they think that I shaved on purpose to? They certainly would think so. Not on any account. And the worst of it was he was so coarse, so dirty, he had the manners of a pothouse. And even admitting that he knew he had some of the essentials of gentlemen, what was there in that to be proud of? Everyone ought to be a gentleman and more than that, and all the same he remembered. He, too, had done little things, not exactly dishonest, and yet, and what thoughts he sometimes had. And to set all that beside Avdotya Romanovna, confound it. So, be it. Well, he'd make a point then of being dirty, greasy, pothouse in his manners, and he wouldn't care. He'd be worse. He was engaged in such monologues when Zosimov, who had spent the night in Praskovia Pavlovna's parlor, came in. He was going home and was in a hurry to look at the invalid first. Razumin informed him that Raskolnikov was sleeping like a dormouse. Zosimov gave orders that they shouldn't wake him and promised to see him again about 11. If he is still at home, he added. Damn it all. If one can't control one's patients, how is one to cure them? Do you know whether he will go to them, or whether they are coming here? They are coming, I think, said Razumin, understanding the object of the question. And they will discuss their family affairs, no doubt. I'll be off. You, as the doctor, have more right to be here than I. But I am not a father confessor. I shall come and go away. I've plenty to do besides looking after them. One thing worries me, interposed Razumin, frowning. On the way home I talked a lot of drunken nonsense to him, all sort of things, and amongst them that you were afraid that he might become insane. You told the ladies so, too. I know it was stupid. You may beat me. If you like. Did you think so seriously? That's nonsense, I tell you. How could I think it seriously? You yourself described him as a monomaniac when you fetched me to him, and we added fuel to the fire yesterday. You did? That is, with your story about the painter. It was a nice conversation, when he was, perhaps, mad on that very point. If only I'd known what happened then at the police station, and that some wretch had insulted him with the suspicion. I would not have allowed that conversation yesterday. These monomaniacs will make a mountain out of a molehill, and see their fancies as solid realities. As far as I remember, it was Zametov's story that cleared up half the mystery, to my mind. Why? I know one case in which a hypochondriac, a man of 40, cut the throat of a little boy of 8 because he couldn't endure the jokes he made every day at table. And in this case is Rags, the insolent police officer, the fever and this suspicion, all that working upon a man half frantic with hypochondria and with his morbid exceptional vanity. That may well have been the starting point of illness. Well, bother it all. And, by the way, that Zametov certainly is a nice fellow, but he shouldn't have told all that last night. He is an awful chatterbox. But whom did he tell it to? You and me? And Porfiry? What does that matter? And, by the way, have you any influence on them, his mother and sister? Tell them to be more careful with him. Today, they'll get on all right. Razumihin answered reluctantly. Why is he so set against this Luzin? A man with money, and she doesn't seem to dislike him. And they haven't a farthing, I suppose? But what business is it of yours? Razumihin cried with annoyance. How can I tell whether they've a farthing? Ask them yourself, and perhaps you'll find out. Phoo! What an ass you are sometimes. Last night's wine has not gone off yet. Goodbye. Thank your Praskovia Pavlovna from me for my night's lodging. She locked herself in, made no reply to my bonjour through the door. She was up at 7 o'clock. The samovar was taken into her from the kitchen. I was not vouchsafed a personal interview. At 9 o'clock precisely, Razumin reached the lodgings at Bakayev's house. Both ladies were waiting for him with nervous impatience. They had risen at 7 o'clock, or earlier. He entered looking as black as night, bowed awkwardly, and was at once furious with himself for it. He had reckoned without his host. Pulcheria Alexandrovna fairly rushed at him, seized him by both hands, and was almost kissing them. He glanced timidly at Avdotya Romanovna, but her proud countenance wore at that moment an expression of such gratitude and friendliness, such complete and unlooked-for respect, in place of the sneering looks and ill-disguised contempt he had expected, that it threw him into greater confusion than if he had been met with abuse. Fortunately, there was a subject for conversation, and he made haste to snatch at it. Hearing that everything was going well, and that Rhodia had not yet waked, Pulcheria Alexandrovna declared that she was glad to hear it, because she had something which it was very, very necessary to talk over beforehand. Then followed an inquiry about breakfast and an invitation to have it with them. They had waited to have it with him. Avdotya Romanovna rang the bell. It was answered by a ragged, dirty waiter, and they asked him to bring tea, which was served at last, but in such a dirty and disorderly way that the ladies were ashamed. Razumihin vigorously attacked the lodgings, but, remembering Luzin, stopped in embarrassment and was greatly relieved by Pulcheria Alexandrovna's questions, which showered in a continual stream upon him. He talked for 3/4 of an hour, being constantly interrupted by their questions, and succeeded in describing to them all the most important facts he knew of the last year of Raskolnikov's life, concluding with a circumstantial account of his illness. He omitted, however, many things which were better omitted, including the scene at the police station with all its consequences. They listened eagerly to his story, and, when he thought he had finished and satisfied his listeners, he found that they considered he had hardly begun. Tell me. What do you think? Excuse me, I still don't know your name. Pulcheria Alexandrovna put in hastily. Dmitri Prokofitch. I should like very, very much to know Dmitri Prokofitch, how he looks on things in general now. That is, how can I explain what are his likes and dislikes? Is he always so irritable? Tell me, if you can, what are his hopes and, so to say, his dreams? Under what influences is he now? In a word, I should like, mother, how can he answer all that at once? Observed Dunya. Good heavens, I had not expected to find him in the least like this, Dmitri Prokofitch. Naturally, answered Razumihin. I have no mother, but my uncle comes every year, and almost every time he can scarcely recognize me, even in appearance, though he is a clever man, and your 3 years' separation means a great deal. What am I to tell you? I have known Radion for 1.5 years. He is morose, gloomy, proud, and haughty, and of late, and perhaps for a long time before, he has been suspicious and fanciful. He has a noble nature and a kind heart. He does not like showing his feelings, and would rather do a cruel thing than open his heart freely. Sometimes, though, he is not at all morbid, but simply cold and inhumanly callous. It's as though he were alternating between two characters. Sometimes he is fearfully reserved. He says he is so busy that everything is a hindrance, and yet he lies in bed doing nothing. He doesn't jeer at things, not because he hasn't the wit, but as though he hadn't time to waste on such trifles. He never listens to what is said to him. He is never interested in what interests other people at any given moment. He thinks very highly of himself, and perhaps he is right. Well, what more? I think your arrival will have a most beneficial influence upon him. God grant it may, cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna, distressed by Razumihin's account of Herodia. And Razumihin ventured to look more boldly at Avdotya Romanovna at last. He glanced at her often while he was talking, but only for a moment, and looked away again at once. Avdotya Romanovna sat at the table, listening attentively, then got up again, and began walking to and fro with her arms folded and her lips compressed, occasionally putting in a question without stopping her walk. She had the same habit of not listening to what was said. She was wearing a dress of thin dark stuff, and she had a white transparent scarf round her neck. Razumihin soon detected signs of extreme poverty in their belongings. Had Avdotya Romanovna been dressed like a queen, he felt that he would not be afraid of her. But perhaps just because she was poorly dressed and that he noticed all the misery of her surroundings, his heart was filled with dread, and he began to be afraid of every word he uttered, every gesture he made, which was very trying for a man who already felt diffident. You've told us a great deal that is interesting about my brother's character, and have told it impartially. I am glad. I thought that you were too uncritically devoted to him, observed Avdotya Romanovna with a smile. I think you are right that he needs a woman's care, she added thoughtfully. I didn't say so, but I dare say you are right. Only what? He loves no one, and perhaps he never will, Razumihin declared decisively. You mean he is not capable of love? Do you know, Avdotya Romanovna, you are awfully like your brother, in everything indeed, he blurted out suddenly to his own surprise, but remembering at once what he had just before said to her brother, he turned as red as a crab and was overcome with confusion. Avdotya Romanovna couldn't help laughing when she looked at him. You may both be mistaken about Rhodia, Pulcheria Alexandrovna remarked, slightly piqued. I am not talking of our present difficulty, Dunya. What Fyodor Petrovitch writes in this letter, and what you and I suppose may be mistaken, but you can't imagine Dmitri Prokofitch, how moody and, so to say, capricious he is. I never could depend on what he would do when he was only 15, and I am sure that he might do something now that nobody else would think of doing. Well, for instance, do you know how a year and a half ago he astounded me and gave me a shock that nearly killed me when he had the idea of marrying that girl? What was her name? His landlady's daughter. Did you hear about that affair? Asked Avdotya Romanovna. Do you suppose, Pulcheria Alexandrovna continued warmly, do you suppose that my tears, my entreaties, my illness, my possible death from grief, our poverty would have made him pause? No, he would calmly have disregarded all obstacles. And yet it isn't that he doesn't love us. He has never spoken a word of that affair to me, Razumihin answered cautiously. But I did hear something from Praskovia Pavlovna herself, though she is by no means a gossip, and what I heard certainly was rather strange. And what did you hear? Both the ladies asked at once. Well, nothing very special. I only learned that the marriage, which only failed to take place through the girl's death, was not at all to Praskovia Pavlovna's liking. They say, too, the girl was not all pretty. In fact, I am told positively ugly and such an invalid and queer, but she seems to have had some good qualities. She must have had some good qualities, or it's quite inexplicable. She had no money either, and he wouldn't have considered her money. But it's always difficult to judge in such matters. I am sure she was a good girl, Avdotya Romanovna observed briefly. God, forgive me. I simply rejoiced at her death, though I don't know which of them would cause most misery to the other, either her or she to him, Pulcheria Alexandrovna concluded. Then she began tentatively questioning him about the scene on the previous day with Luzin, hesitating and continually glancing at Dunya, obviously to the latter's annoyance. This incident, more than all the rest, evidently caused her uneasiness, even consternation. Razumihin described it in detail again, but this time he added his own conclusions. He openly blamed Raskolnikov for intentionally insulting Fyodor Petrovitch, not seeking to excuse him on the score of his illness. He had planned it before his illness, he added. I think so, too. Pulcheria Alexandrovna agreed with a dejected air, but she was very much surprised at hearing Razumihin express himself so carefully and even with a certain respect about Fyodor Petrovitch. Avdotya Romanovna, too, was struck by it. So, this is your opinion of Fyodor Petrovitch? Pulcheria Alexandrovna could not resist asking. I can have no other opinion of your daughter's future husband, Razumihin answered firmly and with warmth. And I don't say it simply from vulgar politeness, but simply because Avdotya Romanovna has of her own free will deigned to accept this man. If I spoke so rudely of him last night, it was because I was disgustingly drunk and mad besides. Yes, mad, crazy. I lost my head completely, and this morning I am ashamed of it. He crimsoned and ceased speaking. Avdotya Romanovna flushed, but did not break the silence. She had not uttered a word from the moment they began to speak of Luzin. Without her support, Pulcheria Alexandrovna obviously did not know what to do. At last, faltering and continually glancing at her daughter, she confessed that she was exceedingly worried by one circumstance. You see, Dmitri Prokofitch, she began. I'll be perfectly open with Dmitri Prokofitch, Dunya? Of course, mother, said Avdotya Romanovna emphatically. This is what it is, she began in haste, as though the permission to speak of her trouble lifted a weight off her mind. Very early this morning we got a note from Fyodor Petrovitch in reply to our letter announcing our arrival. He promised to meet us at the station, you know. Instead of that, he sent a servant to bring us the address of these lodgings and to show us the way, and he sent a message that he would be here himself this morning. But this morning, this note came from him. You'd better read it yourself. There is one point in it which worries me very much. You will soon see what that is, and tell me your candid opinion. Dmitri Prokofitch, you know Rhodia's character better than anyone, and no one can advise us better than you can. Dunya, I must tell you, made her decision at once. but I still don't feel sure how to act, and I've been waiting for your opinion." Razumihin opened a note, which was dated the previous evening, and read, as follows: "Dear Madam Pulcheria Alexandrovna, I have the honor to inform you that owing to unforeseen obstacles, I was rendered unable to meet you at the railway station. I sent a very competent person with the same object in view. I likewise shall be deprived of the honor of an interview with you tomorrow morning by business in the Senate that does not admit of delay, and also that I may not intrude on your family circle while you are meeting your son, and of Dosha Romanovna, her brother. I shall have the honor of visiting you and paying you my respects at your lodgings not later than tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock precisely, and herewith I venture to present my earnest, and I may add, imperative request that Rodion Romanovitch may not be present at our interview, as he offered me a gross and unprecedented affront on the occasion of my visit to him in his illness yesterday. And moreover, since I desire from you personally an indispensable and circumstantial explanation upon a certain point, in regard to which I wish to learn your own interpretation, I have the honor to inform you, in anticipation, that if, in spite of my request, I meet Rodion Romanovitch, I shall be compelled to withdraw immediately, and then you have only yourself to blame. I write on the assumption that Rodion Romanovitch, who appeared so ill at my visit, suddenly recovered 2 hours later, and so, being able to leave the house, may visit you also. I was confirmed in that belief by the testimony of my own eyes in the lodging of a drunken man who was run over and has since died, to whose daughter, a young woman of notorious behavior, he gave 25 rubles on the pretext of the funeral, which gravely surprised me, knowing what pains you were at to raise that sum. Herewith expressing my special respect to your estimable daughter, Avdotya Romanovna, I beg you to accept the respectful homage of your humble servant, P. Luzin." "What am I to do now, Dmitri Prokofitch?" began Pulcheria. "Alexandrovna," almost weeping, "how can I ask Rodion not to come? Yesterday he insisted so earnestly on our refusing Pyotr Petrovitch, and now we are ordered not to receive Rodia. He will come on purpose if he knows, and what will happen then? Act on Avdotya Romanovna's decision." Razumihin answered calmly at once. "Oh, dear me! She says, goodness knows what she says. She doesn't explain her object. She says that it would be best, at least, not that it would be best, but that it's absolutely necessary that Rodia should make a point of being here at 8 o'clock, and that they must meet. I didn't want him to show him the letter, but to prevent him from coming by some stratagem with your help, because he is so irritable. Besides, I don't understand about that drunkard who died and that daughter, and how he could have given the daughter all the money, which cost you such sacrifice, mother," put in Avdotya Romanovna. "He was not himself yesterday," Razumihin said thoughtfully. "If you only knew what he was up to in a restaurant yesterday, though there was sense in it too. He did say something, as we were going home yesterday evening, about a dead man and a girl, but I didn't understand a word. But last night, I myself, the best thing, mother, will be for us to go to him ourselves, and there I assure you we shall see at once what's to be done. Besides, it's getting late. Good heavens, it's past 10, she cried, looking at a splendid gold enamel watch which hung round her neck on a thin Venetian chain, and looked entirely out of keeping with the rest of her dress. A present from her fiancé, thought Razumihin. We must start. Dunya, we must start, her mother cried in a flutter. He will be thinking we are still angry after yesterday, from our coming so late. Merciful heavens! While she said this, she was hurriedly putting on her hat and mantle. Dunya, too, put on her things. Her gloves, as Razumihin noticed, were not merely shabby but had holes in them, and yet this evident poverty gave the two ladies an air of special dignity, which is always found in people who know how to wear poor clothes. Razumihin looked reverently at Dunya and felt proud of escorting her. The queen who mended her stockings in prison, he thought, must have looked an every inch a queen, and even more a queen than at sumptuous banquets and levees. "My God!" exclaimed Pulcheria Alexandrovna. "Little did I think that I should ever fear seeing my son, my darling Rodia. I am afraid, Dmitri Prokofitch," she added, glancing at him timidly. "Don't be afraid, mother," said Dunya, kissing her. "Better have faith in him." "Oh, dear, I have faith in him, but I haven't slept all night, exclaimed the poor woman. They came out into the street. "Do you know, Dunya, when I dozed a little this morning, I dreamed of Marfa Petrovna. She was all in white. She came up to me, took my hand, and shook her head at me, but so sternly as though she were blaming me. Is that a good omen? Oh, dear me! You don't know. Dmitri Prokofitch, that Marfa Petrovna's dead." "No, I didn't know." "Who is Marfa Petrovna?" "She died suddenly, and only fancy, afterwards Mama put in Dunya. He doesn't know who Marfa Petrovna is." "Ah, you don't know? And I was thinking that you knew all about us." "Forgive me, Dmitri Prokofitch. I don't know what I am thinking about these last few days. I look upon you really as a providence for us, and so I took it for granted that you knew all about us. I look on you as a relation. Don't be angry with me for saying so. Dear me, what's the matter with your right hand? Have you knocked it?" "Yes, I bruised it," muttered Razumin, overjoyed. "I sometimes speak too much in the heart, so that Dunya finds fault with me. But, dear me, what a cupboard he lives in. I wonder whether he is awake? Does this woman, his landlady, consider a room? Listen, you say he does not like to show his feelings, so perhaps I shall annoy him with my weaknesses? Do advise me, Dmitri Prokofitch, how am I to treat him? I feel quite distracted, you know. Don't question him too much about anything if you see him frown. Don't ask him too much about his health. He doesn't like that. Ah, Dmitri Prokofitch, how hard it is to be a mother. But here are the stairs. One awful staircase. Mother, you are quite pale. Don't distress yourself, darling," said Dunya, caressing her. Then with flashing eyes she added, "He ought to be happy at seeing you, and you are tormenting yourself so. Wait, I'll peep in and see whether he is waked up." The ladies slowly followed Razumin, who went on before, and when they reached the landlady's door on the 4th story, they noticed that her door was a tiny crack open, and that 2 keen black eyes were watching them from the darkness within. When their eyes met, the door was suddenly shut with such a slam that Pulcheria Alexandrovna almost cried out. Chapter 3. He is well, quite well. Zosimov cried cheerfully as they entered. He had come in 10 minutes earlier, and was sitting in the same place as before, on the sofa. Raskolnikov was sitting in the opposite corner, fully dressed and carefully washed and combed, as he had not been for some time past. The room was immediately crowded, yet Nastasia managed to follow the visitors in and stayed to listen. Raskolnikov really was almost well as compared with his condition the day before, but he was still pale, listless, and somber. He looked like a wounded man, or one who has undergone some terrible physical suffering. His brows were knitted, his lips compressed, his eyes feverish. He spoke little and reluctantly, as though performing a duty, and there was a restlessness in his movements. He only wanted a sling on his arm or a bandage on his finger to complete the impression of a man with a painful abscess or a broken arm. The pale, somber face lighted up for a moment when his mother and sister entered, but this only gave a look of more intense suffering in place of its listless dejection. The light soon died away, but a look of suffering remained, and Zosimov, watching and studying his patient with all the zest of a young doctor beginning to practice, noticed in him no joy at the arrival of his mother and sister, but a sort of bitter, hidden determination to bear another hour or 2 of inevitable torture. He saw later that almost every word of the following conversation seemed to touch on some sore place and irritate it. But at the same time he marveled at the power of controlling himself and hiding his feelings in a patient who the previous day had, like a monomaniac, fallen into a frenzy at the slightest word. "Yes, I see myself now that I am almost well," said Raskolnikov, giving his mother and sister a kiss of welcome which made Pulcheria Alexandrovna radiant at once. "And I don't say this as I did. Yesterday," he said, addressing Razumin, with a friendly pressure of his hand. "Yes, indeed, I am quite surprised at him today," began Zosimov, much delighted at the lady's entrance, for he had not succeeded in keeping up a conversation with his patient for 10 minutes. "In another 3 or 4 days, if he goes on like this, he will be just as before, that is, as he was a month ago, or 2, or perhaps even 3. This has been coming on for a long while. Confess now that it has been perhaps your own fault," he added, with a tentative smile, as though still afraid of irritating him. It is very possible, answered Raskolnikov coldly. I should say, too, continued Zosimov with zest, that your complete recovery depends solely on yourself. Now that one can talk to you, I should like to impress upon you that it is essential to avoid the elementary, so to speak, fundamental causes tending to produce your morbid condition. In that case, you will be cured. If not, it will go from bad to worse. These fundamental causes I don't know, but they must be known to you. You are an intelligent man, and must have observed yourself, of course. I fancy the first stage of your derangement coincides with your leaving the university. You must not be left without occupation, and so work and a definite aim set before you might, I fancy, be very beneficial. Yes, you are perfectly right. I will make haste and return to university. And then everything will go smoothly. Zosimov, who had begun his sage advice partly to make an effect before the ladies, was certainly somewhat mystified when, glancing at his patient, he observed unmistakable mockery on his face. This lasted an instant, however. Pulcheria Alexandrovna began at once thanking Zosimov, especially for his visit to their lodging the previous night. What? He saw you last night. Raskolnikov asked, as though startled. Then you have not slept either after your journey. Asig, Rodia. That was only till 2 o'clock. Dunya and I never go to bed before 2 at home. I don't know how to thank him either, Raskolnikov went on, suddenly frowning and looking down, setting aside the question of payment. Forgive me for referring to it, he turned to Zosimov. I really don't know what I have done to deserve such special attention from you. I simply don't understand it. And it weighs upon me indeed because I don't understand it. I tell you so candidly. Don't be irritated. Zosimov forced himself to laugh. Assume that you are my first patient. Well, we fellows just beginning to practice love our first patients as if they were our children, and some almost fall in love with them. And, of course, I am not rich in patience. I say nothing about him, added Raskolnikov, pointing to Razumihin, though he has had nothing from me either but insult and trouble. What nonsense he is talking. Why, you are in a sentimental mood today, are you? Shouted Razumihin. If he had had more penetration, he would have seen that there was no trace of sentimentality in him, but something indeed quite the opposite. But Avdotya Romanovna noticed it. She was intently and uneasily watching her brother. As for you, mother, I don't dare to speak, he went on, as though repeating a lesson learned by heart. It is only today that I have been able to realize a little how distressed you must have been here yesterday, waiting for me to come back. When he had said this, he suddenly held out his hand to his sister, smiling without a word. But in this smile there was a flash of real, unfeigned feeling. Dunya caught it at once, and warmly pressed his hand, overjoyed and thankful. It was the first time he had addressed her since their dispute the previous day. The mother's face lighted up with ecstatic happiness at the sight of this conclusive, unspoken reconciliation. Yes, that is what I love him for. Razumihin, exaggerating it all, muttered to himself, with a vigorous turn in his chair. He has these movements. And how well he does it all, the mother was thinking to herself. What generous impulses he has, and how simply, how delicately he put an end to all the misunderstanding with his sister, simply by holding out his hand at the right minute and looking at her like that. And what fine eyes he has, and how fine his whole face is. He is even better looking than Dunya. But, good heavens, what a suit! How terribly he's dressed! Vasya, the messenger boy in Afanasy Ivanitch's shop, is better dressed. I could rush at him and hug him, weep over him, but I am afraid. Oh dear, he's so strange. He's talking kindly, but I'm afraid. Why, what am I afraid of? Oh, Rodia, you wouldn't believe, she began suddenly, in haste to answer his words to her, how unhappy Dunya and I were yesterday. Now that it's all over and done with, and we are quite happy again, I can tell you. Fancy, we ran here almost straight from the train to embrace you and that woman. Ah, here she is. Good morning, Nastasia. She told us at once that you were lying a high fever and had just run away from the doctor in delirium, and they were looking for you in the streets. You can't imagine how we felt. I couldn't help thinking of the tragic end of Lieutenant Patanchikov, a friend of your father's. You can't remember him, Rodia, who ran out in the same way in a high fever and fell into the well in the courtyard, and they couldn't pull him out till next day. Of course, we exaggerated things. We were on the point of rushing to find Pyotr Petrovitch to ask him to help. Because we were alone, utterly alone, she said plaintively and stopped short. Suddenly, recollecting it was still somewhat dangerous to speak of Pyotr Petrovitch, although we are quite happy again. Yes, yes. Of course it's very annoying, Raskolnikov muttered in reply, but with such a preoccupied and inattentive air that Dunya gazed at him in perplexity. What else was it I wanted to say? He went on trying to recollect. Oh, yes, Mother, and you too. Dunya, please don't think that I didn't mean to come and see you today, and was waiting for you to come first. What are you saying, Rodia? Cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna. She, too, was surprised. Is he answering us as a duty? Dunya wondered. Is he being reconciled and asking forgiveness, as though he were performing a rite or repeating a lesson? I've only just waked up, and want to go to you, but was delayed owing to my clothes. I forgot yesterday to ask her, Nastasia, to wash out the blood. I've only just dressed. Blood? What blood? Pulcheria Alexandrovna asked in alarm. Oh, nothing. Don't be uneasy. It was when I was wandering about yesterday. Rather delirious. I chanced upon a man who had been run over, a clerk. Delirious? But you remember everything. Razumihin interrupted. That's true, Raskolnikov answered with special carefulness. I remember everything even to the slightest detail, and yet why I did that and went there and said that, I can't clearly explain now. A familiar phenomenon, interposed Zosimov. Actions are sometimes performed in a masterly and most cunning way, while the direction of the actions is deranged and dependent on various morbid impressions. It's like a dream. Perhaps it's a good thing, really, that he should think me almost a madman, thought Raskolnikov. Why? People in perfect health act in the same way, too, observed Dunya, looking uneasily at Zosimov. There is some truth in your observation, the latter replied. In that sense, we are certainly all not infrequently like madmen, but with a slight difference that the deranged are somewhat madder, for we must draw a line. A normal man, it is true, hardly exists. Among dozens, perhaps hundreds of thousands, hardly one is to be met with. At the word madman, carelessly dropped by Zosimov in his chatter on his favorite subject, everyone frowned. Raskolnikov sat seeming not to pay attention, plunged in thought with strange smile on his pale lips. He was still meditating on something. Well, what about the man who was run over? I interrupted you. Razumihin cried hastily. What? Raskolnikov seemed to wake up. Oh, I got spattered with blood, helping to carry him to his lodging. By the way, Mama, I did an unpardonable thing yesterday. I was literally out of my mind. I gave away all the money you sent me to his wife for the funeral. She's a widow now in consumption, a poor creature. 3 little children, starving. Nothing in the house. There's a daughter, too. Perhaps you have given it yourself if you'd seen them. But I had no right to do it, I admit, especially as I knew how you needed the money yourself. To help others one must have a right to do it, or else Kreves, Jens, Saivu and eats pa contents. He laughed. That's right, isn't it, Dunya? No, it's not, answered Dunya, firmly. Bah, you too have ideals, he muttered, looking at her almost with hatred, and smiling sarcastically. I ought to have considered that. Well, that's praiseworthy, and it's better for you. And if you reach a line you won't overstep, you will be unhappy, and if you overstep it, maybe you will be still unhappier. But all that's nonsense, he added irritably, vexed at being carried away. I only meant to say that I beg your forgiveness, Mother, he concluded, shortly end. Abruptly, that's enough, Rodia. I am sure that everything you do is very good, said his mother, delighted. Don't be too sure, he answered, twisting his mouth into a smile. A silence followed. There was a certain constraint in all this conversation, and in the silence, and in the reconciliation, and in the forgiveness, and all were feeling it. It is as though they were afraid of me, Raskolnikov was thinking to himself, looking askance at his mother and sister. Pulcheria Alexandrovna was indeed growing more timid the longer she kept silent. Yet in their absence I seemed to love them so much, flashed through his mind. Do you know, Rhodia, Marfa Petrovna is dead. Pulcheria Alexandrovna suddenly blurted out. What Marfa Petrovna? Oh, mercy on us, Marfa Petrovna Svidrigailov. I wrote you so much about her. A.H. Yes, I remember. So she's dead. Oh, really? He roused himself suddenly, as if waking up. What did she die of? Only imagine, quite suddenly. Pulcheria Alexandrovna answered hurriedly, encouraged by his curiosity. On the very day I was sending you that letter. Would you believe it? That awful man seems to have been the cause of her death. They say he beat her dreadfully. Why? Were they on such bad terms? He asked, addressing his sister. Not at all. Quite the contrary, indeed. With her, he was always very patient, considerate even. In fact, all those 7 years of their married life, he gave way to her, too much so indeed, in many cases. All of a sudden he seems to have lost patience. Then he could not have been so awful if he controlled himself for 7 years? You seem to be defending him, Dunya? No, he's an awful man. I can imagine nothing more awful. Dunya answered, almost with shudder, knitting her brows and sinking into thought. That had happened in the morning. Pulcheria Alexandrovna went on hurriedly, and directly afterwards she ordered the horses to be harnessed to drive to the town immediately after dinner. She always used to drive to the town in such cases. She ate a very good dinner, I am told. After the beating, that was always her habit, and immediately after dinner, so as not to be late in starting, she went to bathhouse. You see, she was undergoing some treatment with baths. They have a cold spring there, and she used to bathe in it regularly every day, and no sooner had she got into the water when she suddenly had a stroke. I should think so, said Zosimov. And did he beat her badly? What does that matter? Put in Dunya. Hashem, but I don't know why you want to tell us such gossip, mother, said Raskolnikov irritably, as it were in spite of himself. My dear, I don't know what to talk about, broke from Pulcheria Alexandrovna. Why? Are you all afraid of me? He asked with constrained smile. That's certainly true, said Dunya, looking directly and sternly at her brother. Mother was crossing herself with terror as she came up the stairs. His face worked, as though in convulsion. Asich, what are you saying, Dunya? Don't be angry, please, Rhodia. Why did you say that, Dunya? Pulcheria Alexandrovna began, overwhelmed. You see, coming here, I was dreaming all the way in the train how we should meet, how we should talk over everything together, and I was so happy I did not notice the journey. But what am I saying? I am happy now. You should not, Dunya. I am happy now, simply in seeing you, Rhodia. Hush, mother. He muttered in confusion, not looking at her, but pressing her hand. We shall have time to speak freely of everything. As he said this, he was suddenly overwhelmed with confusion and turned pale. Again that awful sensation he had known of late passed with deadly chill over his soul. Again it became suddenly plain and perceptible to him that he had just told a fearful lie, that he would never now be able to speak freely of everything, that he would never again be able to speak of anything to anyone. The anguish of this thought was such that for a moment he almost forgot himself. He got up from his seat, and not looking at anyone walked towards the door. What are you about? Cried Razumin, clutching him by the arm. He sat down again and began looking about him in silence. They were all looking at him in perplexity. But what are you all so dull for? He shouted, suddenly and quite unexpectedly. Do say something. What's the use of sitting like this? Come, do speak. Let us talk. We meet together and sit in silence. Come, anything. Thank God. I was afraid the same thing as yesterday was beginning again, said Pulcheria Alexandrovna, crossing herself. What is the matter, Rhodia? Asked Avdotya Romanovna, distrustfully. Oh, nothing. I remembered something, he answered, and suddenly laughed. Well, if you remembered something, that's all right. I was beginning to think, muttered Zosimov, getting up from the sofa, It is time for me to be off. I will. Looking again, perhaps, if I can. He made his bows and went out. What an excellent man, observed Pulcheria Alexandrovna. Yes, excellent, splendid, well-educated, intelligent. Raskolnikov began, suddenly speaking with surprising rapidity, and a liveliness he had not shown till then. I can't remember where I met him before my illness. I believe I have met him somewhere. And this is a good man, too. He nodded at Razumihin. Do you like him, Dunya? He asked her, and suddenly, for some unknown reason, laughed. Very much, answered Dunya. Phoo! What a pig you are. Razumihin protested, blushing in terrible confusion, and he got up from his chair. Pulcheria Alexandrovna smiled faintly, but Raskolnikov laughed aloud. Where are you off to? I must go. You need not at all. Stay. Zosimov has gone, so you must. Don't go. What's the time? Is it 12 o'clock? What a pretty watch you've got, Dunya. But why are you all silent again? I do all the talking. It was a present from Marfa Petrovna, answered Dunya. And a very expensive one, added Pulcheria Alexandrovna. Ah, what a big one. Hardly like a lady's. I like that sort, said Dunya. So it is not a present from her fiancé, thought Razumihin, and was unreasonably delighted. I thought it was Luzin's present, observed Raskolnikov. No, he has not made Dunya any presents yet. Ah, and do you remember, Mother, I was in love and wanted to get married? He said suddenly, looking at his mother, who was disconcerted by the sudden change of subject and the way he spoke of it. Oh, yes, my dear. Pulcheria Alexandrovna exchanged glances with Dunya and Razumihin. Yes. What shall I tell you? I don't remember much indeed. She was such a sickly girl, he went on, growing dreamy and looking down again. Quite an invalid. She was fond of giving alms to the poor, and was always dreaming of a nunnery, and once she burst into tears when she began talking to me about it. Yes, I remember. I remember very well. She was an ugly little thing. I really don't know what drew me to her then. I think it was because she was always ill. If she had been lame or hunchback, I believe I should have liked her better still. He smiled dreamily. Yes, it was a sort of spring delirium. No, it was not only spring delirium, said Dunya with warm feeling. He fixed a strained, intent look on his sister, but did not hear or did not understand her words. Then, completely lost in thought, he got up, went up to his mother, kissed her, went back to his place, and sat down. You love her even now, said Pulcheria Alexandrovna, touched. Her? Now? Oh, yes. You ask about her? No, that's all now, as it were, in another world, and so long ago. And indeed everything happening here seems somehow far away. He looked attentively at them. You now? I seem to be looking at you from 1,000 miles away. But goodness knows why we are talking of that. And what's the use of asking? About it? He added with annoyance, and biting his nails, fell into dreamy silence again. What a wretched lodging you have, Rhodia. It's like a tomb, said Pulcheria Alexandrovna, suddenly breaking the oppressive silence. I am sure it's quite half through your lodging you have become so melancholy. My lodging, he answered listlessly. Yes, the lodging had a great deal to do with it. I thought that, too. If only you knew, though, what a strange thing you said just now, Mother. He said, laughing strangely, a little more. And their companionship, this mother and this sister, with him after 3 years' absence, this intimate tone of conversation, in face of the utter impossibility of really speaking about anything, would have been beyond his power of endurance. But there was one urgent matter which must be settled one way or the other that day. So he had decided when he woke. Now he was glad to remember it, as a means of escape. Listen, Dunya, he began gravely and drily. Of course I beg your pardon for yesterday, but I consider it my duty to tell you again that I do not withdraw from my chief point. It is me or Luzin. If I am a scoundrel, you must not be. One is enough. If you marry Luzin, I cease at once to look on you as a sister. Rhodia, it is the same as yesterday again, Pulcheria Alexandrovna cried mournfully. And why do you call yourself a scoundrel? I can't bear it. You said the same yesterday. Brother, Dunya answered firmly and with the same dryness. In all this there is a mistake on your part. I thought it over at night and found out the mistake. It is all because you seem to fancy I am sacrificing myself to someone and for someone. That is not the case at all. I am simply marrying for my own sake, because things are hard for me, though, of course, I shall be glad if I succeed in being useful to my family. But that is not the chief motive for my decision. She is lying, he thought to himself, biting his nails. Vindicatively. Proud creature. She won't admit she wants to do it out of charity. Too haughty. Oh, base characters. They even love as though they hate. Oh, how I hate them all. In fact, continued Dunya, I am marrying Fyodor Petrovitch because of two evils I choose the less. I intend to do honestly all he expects of me, so I am not deceiving him. Why did you smile just now? She, too, flushed, and there was a gleam of anger in her eyes. All? He asked with a malignant grin. Within certain limits. Both the manner and form of Fyodor Petrovitch's courtship showed me at once what he wanted. He may, of course, think too well of himself, but I hope he esteems me, too. Why are you laughing again? And why are you blushing again? You are lying, sister. You are intentionally lying simply from feminine obstinacy, simply to hold your own against me. You cannot respect Luzin. I have seen him and talked with him. So you are selling yourself for money, and so, in any case, you are acting basely, and I am glad at least that you can blush for it. It is not true. I am not lying, cried Dunya, losing her composure. I would not marry him if I were not convinced that he esteems me and thinks highly of me. I would not marry him if I were not firmly convinced that I can respect him. Fortunately, I can have convincing proof of it this very day. And such a marriage is not a vileness, as you say. And even if you were right, if I really had determined on a vile action, is it not merciless on your part to speak to me like that? Why do you demand of me a heroism that perhaps you have not either? It is despotism. It is tyranny. If I ruin anyone, it is only myself. I am not committing a murder. Why do you look at me like that? Why are you so pale? Rhodia, darling, what's the matter? Good heavens! You have made him faint, cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna. No, nonsense. It's nothing. A little giddiness, not fainting. You have fainting on the brain. Yes, what was I saying? Oh, yes. In what way will you get convincing proof today that you can respect him and that he esteems you, as you said? I think you said today. Mother, show Rhodia Fyodor Petrovitch's letter, said Dunya. With trembling hands, Pulcheria Alexandrovna gave him the letter. He took it with great interest, but before opening it, he suddenly looked with a sort of wonder at Dunya. It is strange, he said slowly, as though struck by a new idea. What am I making? Such a fuss for? What is it all about? Marry whom you like. He said this as though to himself, but said it aloud, and looked for some time at his sister, as though puzzled. He opened the letter at last, still with the same look of strange wonder on his face. Then, slowly and attentively, he began reading and read it through twice. Pulcheria Alexandrovna showed marked anxiety, and all indeed expected something particular. What surprises me, he began after a short pause, handing the letter to his mother, but not addressing anyone in particular, is that he is a business man, a lawyer, and his conversation is pretentious indeed, and yet he writes such an uneducated letter. They all started. They had expected something quite different. But they all write like that, you know. Razumin observed abruptly. Have you read it? Yes. We showed him. Rhodia, we consulted him just now. Pulcheria Alexandrovna began, embarrassed. That's just the jargon of the courts, Razumin put in. Legal documents are written like that to this day. Legal? Yes, it's just legal business language, not so very uneducated and not quite educated. Business language. Fyodor Petrovitch makes no secret of the fact that he had a cheap education. He is proud indeed of having made his own way, Avdotya Romanovna observed, somewhat offended by her brother's tone. Well, if he's proud of it, he has reason, I don't deny it. You seem to be offended, sister, at my making only such a frivolous criticism on the letter, and to think that I speak of such trifling matters on purpose to annoy you. It is quite the contrary. An observation apropos of the style occurred to me that is by no means irrelevant as things stand. There is one expression, blame yourselves, put in very significantly and plainly, and there's beside the threat that he will go away at once if I am present. That threat to go away is equivalent to a threat to abandon you both if you are disobedient, and to abandon you, now after summoning you to Petersburg. Well, what do you think? Can one resent such an expression from Luzin, as we should if he pointed to Razumihin, had written it, or Zosimov, or one of us? And no, answered Dunya with more animation. I saw clearly that it was too naively expressed, and that perhaps he simply has no skill in writing. That is a true criticism, brother. I did not expect, indeed. It is expressed in legal style, and sounds coarser than perhaps he intended. But I must disillusion you a little. There is one expression in the letter, one slander about me, and rather a contemptible one. I gave the money last night to the widow, a woman in consumption, crushed with trouble, and not on the pretext of the funeral, but simply to pay for the funeral, and not to the daughter, a young woman, as he writes, of notorious behavior, whom I saw last night for the first time in my life, but to the widow. In all this I see a too hasty desire to slander me and to raise dissension between us. It is expressed again in legal jargon, that is to say, with a too obvious display of the aim, and with a very naive eagerness. He is a man of intelligence, but to act sensibly, intelligence is not enough. It all shows the man, and I don't think he has a great esteem for you. I tell you this simply to warn you, because I sincerely wish for your good. Dunya did not reply. Her resolution had been taken. She was only awaiting the evening. Then what is your decision? Rodia? Asked Pulcheria Alexandrovna, who was more uneasy than ever at the sudden, new business-like tone of his talk. What decision? You see, Fyodor Petrovitch writes that you are not to be with us this evening, and that he will go away if you come. So will you come? That, of course, is not for me to decide, but for you first, if you are not offended by such a request, and secondly by Dunya, if she too is not offended. I will do what you think best, he added, drily. Dunya has already decided, and I fully agree with her, Pulcheria Alexandrovna hastened to declare. I decided to ask you, Rodia, to urge you not to fail to be with us at this interview, said Dunya. Will you come? Yes. I will ask you, too, to be with us at 8 o'clock, she said, addressing Razumihin. Mother, I am inviting him, too. Quite right, Dunya. Well, since you have decided, added Pulcheria Alexandrovna, so be it. I shall feel easier myself. I do not like concealment and deception. Better let us have the whole truth. Pyotr Petrovitch may be angry or not now. Chapter 4. At that moment the door was softly opened, and a young girl walked into the room, looking timidly about her. Everyone turned toward her with surprise and curiosity. At first sight, Raskolnikov did not recognize her. It was Sofia Semyonovna Marmeladov. He had seen her yesterday for the first time, but at such a moment, in such surroundings, and in such a dress, that his memory retained a very different image of her. Now she was a modestly and poorly dressed young girl, very young, indeed, almost like a child, with a modest and refined manner, with a candid but somewhat frightened-looking face. She was wearing a very plain indoor dress, and had on a shabby old-fashioned hat, but she still carried a parasol. Unexpectedly finding the room full of people, she was not so much embarrassed as completely overwhelmed with shyness, like a little child. She was even about to retreat. "Oh, it's you," said Raskolnikov, extremely astonished, and he too was confused. He at once recollected that his mother and sister knew through Luzin's letter of some young woman of notorious behavior. He had only just been protesting against Luzin's calumny and declaring that he had seen the girl last night for the first time, and suddenly she had walked in. He remembered, too, that he had not protested against the expression of notorious behavior. All this passed vaguely and fleetingly through his brain, but looking at her more intently, he saw that the humiliated creature was so humiliated that he felt suddenly sorry for her. When she made a movement to retreat in terror, it sent a pang to his heart. "I did not expect you," he said, hurriedly, with a look that made her stop. "Please sit down. You come, no doubt, from Katerina Ivanovna. Allow me, not there. Sit here." At Sonia's entrance, Razumin, who had been sitting on one of Raskolnikov's 3 chairs, close to the door, got up to allow her to enter. Raskolnikov had at first shown her the place on the sofa where Zosimov had been sitting, but feeling that the sofa which served him as a bed was too familiar a place, he hurriedly motioned her to Razumin's chair. "You sit here," he said to Razumin, putting him on the sofa. Sonia sat down, almost shaking with terror, and looked timidly at the 2 ladies. It was evidently almost inconceivable to herself that she could sit down beside them. At the thought of it, she was so frightened that she hurriedly got up again, and in utter confusion addressed Raskolnikov. I have come for 1 minute. Forgive me for disturbing you," she began falteringly. "I come from Katerina Ivanovna, and she had no one to send. Katerina Ivanovna told me to beg you to be at the service in the morning at Mitrofanivsky, and then to her, to do her the honor, she told me to beg you." Sonia stammered and ceased speaking. "I will try." "Certainly, most certainly," answered Raskolnikov. He, too, stood up, and he, too, faltered and could not finish his sentence. "Please sit down," he said suddenly. "I want to talk to you. You are perhaps in a hurry, but please be so kind. Spare me 2 minutes." And he drew up a chair for her. Sonia sat down again, and again timidly she took a hurried, frightened look at the 2 ladies, and dropped her eyes. Raskolnikov's pale face flushed. A shudder passed over him. His eyes glowed. "Mother," he said, firmly and insistently, "this is Sofia Semyonovna Marmeladov, the daughter of that unfortunate Mr. Marmeladov, who was run over yesterday before my eyes, and of whom I was just telling you." Pulcheria Alexandrovna glanced at Sonia, and slightly screwed up her eyes. In spite of her embarrassment before Rodia's urgent and challenging look, she could not deny herself that satisfaction. Dunya gazed gravely and intently into the poor girl's face, and scrutinized her with perplexity. Sonia, hearing herself introduced, tried to raise her eyes again, but was more embarrassed than ever. "I wanted to ask you," said Raskolnikov hastily, "how things were arranged yesterday. You were not worried by the police, for instance?" "No, that was all right. It was too evident the cause of death. They did not worry us. Only the lodgers are angry." "Why?" "At the body's remaining so long. You see it is hot now, so that today they will carry it to the cemetery, into the chapel, until tomorrow. At first Katerina Ivanovna was unwilling, but now she sees herself that it's necessary. Today, then, she begs you to do us the honor to be in the church tomorrow for the service, and then to be present at the funeral lunch." "She is giving a funeral lunch?" "Yes, just a little. She told me to thank you very much for helping us yesterday. But for you, we should have had nothing for the funeral." All at once her lips and chin began trembling, but with an effort she controlled herself, looking down again. During the conversation, Raskolnikov watched her carefully. She had a thin, very thin, pale little face, rather irregular and angular, with a sharp little nose and chin. She could not have been called pretty, but her blue eyes were so clear, and when they lighted up, there was such a kindliness and simplicity in her expression that one could not help being attracted. Her face, and her whole figure indeed, had another peculiar characteristic. In spite of her 18 years, she looked almost a little girl, almost a child, and in some of her gestures, this childishness seemed almost absurd. But has Katerina Ivanovna been able to manage with such small means? Does she even mean to have a funeral lunch? Raskolnikov asked, persistently keeping up the conversation. "The coffin will be plain, of course, and everything will be plain, so it won't cost much. Katerina Ivanovna and I have reckoned it all out, so that there will be enough left, and—" Katerina Ivanovna was very anxious it should be so. "You know one can't. It's a comfort to her. She is like that, you know." I understand. Of course. Why you look at my room like that? My mother has just said it is like a tomb." "You gave us everything yesterday," Sonia said suddenly in reply, in a loud, rapid whisper, and again she looked down in confusion. Her lips and chin were trembling once more. She had been struck at once by Raskolnikov's poor surroundings, and now these words broke out spontaneously. A silence followed. There was a light in Dunia's eyes, and even Pulcheria Alexandrovna looked kindly at Sonia. "Rhodia," she said, getting up, "we shall have dinner together, of course." "Come, Dunya." "And you, Rhodia, had better go for a little walk, and then rest and lie down before you come see us. I am afraid we have exhausted you." Yes, I'll come," he answered, getting up fussily. "But I have something to see to." "But surely you will have dinner together?" cried Razumihin, looking in surprise at Raskolnikov. "What do you mean?" Yes, I am coming, of course. And you stay a minute. You do not want him just now, do you, Mother? Or perhaps I am taking him from you?" "Oh, no. And will you, Dmitri Prokofitch, do us the favor dining with us?" "Please do," added Dunya. Razumihin bowed, positively radiant. For one moment, they were all strangely embarrassed. "Goodbye, Rhodia. That is till we meet." "I do not like saying goodbye. Goodbye, Nastasia." "Ah, I have said goodbye again." Pulcheria Alexandrovna meant to greet Sonia, too, but it somehow failed to come off, and she went in a flutter out of the room. But Avdotya Romanovna seemed to await her turn, and following her mother out, gave Sonia an attentive, courteous bow. Sonia, in confusion, gave a hurried, frightened curtsy. There was a look of poignant discomfort in her face, as though Avdotya Romanovna's courtesy and attention were oppressive and painful to her. "Dunya, goodbye," called Raskolnikov in the passage. "Give me your hand." "Why, I did give it to you." "Have you forgotten?" said Dunya, turning warmly and awkwardly to him. "Never mind, give it to me again." And he squeezed her fingers warmly. Dunya smiled, flushed, pulled her hand away, and went off quite happy. "Come, that's capital," he said to Sonia, going back and looking brightly at her. "God give peace to the dead. The living have still to live. That is right, isn't it?" Sonia looked surprised at the sudden brightness of his face. He looked at her for some moments in silence. The whole history of the dead father floated before his memory in those moments. "Heavens, Dunya," Pulcheria Alexandrovna began, as soon as they were in the street, "I really feel relieved myself at coming away, more at ease. How little did I think yesterday in the train that I could ever be glad of that. I tell you again, Mother, he is still very ill. Don't you see? Perhaps worrying about us upset him. We must be patient, and much can be forgiven." "Well, you were not very patient." Pulcheria Alexandrovna caught her up hotly and jealously. "Do you know, Dunya, I was looking at you too. You are the very portrait of him, and not so much in face as in soul. You are both melancholy, both morose and hot-tempered, both haughty and both generous. Surely he can't be an egoist, Dunya. When I think of what is in store for us this evening, my heart sinks. Don't be uneasy, Mother. What must be, will be. Dunya, only think what a position we are in. What if Pyotr Petrovitch breaks it off?" Poor Pulcheria Alexandrovna blurted out incautiously. "He won't be worth much if he does," answered Dunya, sharply and contemptuously. "We did well to come away," Pulcheria Alexandrovna hurriedly broke in. "He was in a hurry about some business, or other. If he gets out and has a breath of air, it is fearfully close in his room." "But where is one to get a breath of air here? The very streets here feel like shut-up rooms. Good heavens! What a town! Stay, this side. They will crush you, carrying something. Why, it is a piano they've got. I declare, how they push. I am very much afraid of that young woman, too." "What young woman, Mother?" "Why, that's Sofia Semyonovna, who was there just now." "Why?" "I have a presentiment, Dunya. Well, you may believe it or not, but as soon as she came in, that very minute, I felt that she was the chief cause of trouble." "Nothing of the sort," cried Dunya in vexation. "What nonsense, with your presentiments, Mother. He only made her acquaintance the evening before, and he did not know her when she came in. Well, you will see. She worries me. But you will see, you will see. I was so frightened. She was gazing at me with those eyes. I could scarcely sit still in my chair when he began introducing her. Do you remember? It seems so strange, but Fyodor Petrovitch writes like that about her. And he introduces her to us, to you. So he must think a great deal of her. People will write anything. We were talked about and written about, too. Have you forgotten? I am sure that she is a good girl, and that it is all nonsense. God grant it may be. And Fyodor Petrovitch is a contemptible slanderer. Dunya snapped out suddenly. Pulcheria Alexandrovna was crushed. The conversation was not resumed. I will tell you what I want with you, said Raskolnikov, drawing Razumihin to the window. Then I will tell Katerina Ivanovna that you are coming, Sonia said hurriedly, preparing to depart. 1 minute, Sofia Semyonovna. We have no secrets. You are not in our way. I want to have another word, or two with you. Listen, he turned suddenly to Razumihin again. You know that, what's his name? Porfiry Petrovitch. I should think so. He is a relation. Why? Added the latter with interest. Is not he managing that case? You know, about that murder? You were speaking about it yesterday. Yes, well, Razumihin's eyes opened wide. He was inquiring for people who had pawned things, and I have some pledges there, too. Trifles. A ring my sister gave me as a keepsake when I left home, and my father's silver watch. They're only worth 5 or 6 rubles altogether, but I value them. So what am I to do now? I do not want to lose the things, especially the watch. I was quaking just now, for fear Mother would ask to look at it, when we spoke of Dunya's watch. It is the only thing of Father's left us. She would be ill if it were lost. You know what women are. So tell me what to do. I know I ought to have given notice at the police station, but would it not be better to go straight to Porfiry? What do you think? The matter might be settled more quickly. You see, Mother may ask for it before dinner. Certainly not to the police station. Certainly to Porfiry. Razumihin shouted in extraordinary excitement. Well, how? Glad I am. Let us go at once. It is a couple of steps. We shall be sure to find him. Very well, let us go. And he will be very, very glad to make your acquaintance. I have often talked to him of you at different times. I was speaking of you yesterday. Let us go. So you knew the old woman? So that's it. It is all turning out splendidly. Oh, yes, Sofia Ivanovna, Sofia Semyonovna, corrected Raskolnikov. Sofia Semyonovna, this is my friend Razumihin, and he is a good man. If you have. To go now. Sonia was beginning, not looking at Razumihin at all, and still more embarrassed. Let us go, decided Raskolnikov. I will come to you today, Sofia Semyonovna. Only tell me where you live. He was not exactly ill at ease, but seemed hurried and avoided her eyes. Sonia gave her address, and flushed as she did so. They all went out together. Don't you lock up? Asked Razumihin, following him on to the stairs. Never, answered Raskolnikov. I have been meaning to buy a lock for these 2 years. People are happy who have no need of locks, he said, laughing, to Sonia. They stood still in the gateway. Do you go to the right, Sofia Semyonovna? How did you find me, by the way? He added, as though he wanted to say something quite different. He wanted to look at her soft, clear eyes, but this was not easy. Why? You gave your address to Polenka yesterday. Polenka? Oh, yes, Polenka. That is a little girl. She is your sister? Did I give her the address? Why, had you forgotten? No, I remember. I had heard my father speak of you, only I did not know your name, and he did not know it. And now I came, and as I had learned your name, I asked today, where does Mr. Raskolnikov live? I did not know you had only a room, too. Goodbye. I will tell Katerina Ivanovna. She was extremely glad to escape at last. She went away looking down, hurrying to get out of sight as soon as possible, to walk the 20 steps to the turning on the right, and to be at last alone, and then moving rapidly along, looking at no one, noticing nothing, to think, to remember, to meditate on every word, every detail. Never, Never had she felt anything like this. Dimly and unconsciously, a whole new world was opening before her. She remembered suddenly that Raskolnikov meant to come to her that day, perhaps at once. "Only not today, please, not today," she kept muttering with a sinking heart, as though entreating someone like a frightened child. Mercy. To me, to that. Room, he will see. Oh, dear. She was not capable at that instant of noticing an unknown gentleman who was watching her and following at her heels. He had accompanied her from the gateway. At the moment when Razumihin, Raskolnikov, and she stood still at parting on the pavement, this gentleman, who was just passing, started on hearing Sonia's words. "And I asked where Mr. Raskolnikov lived?" He turned a rapid but attentive look upon all three, especially upon Raskolnikov, to whom Sonia was speaking, then looked back and noted the house. All this was done in an instant as he passed, and trying not to betray his interest, he walked on more slowly as though waiting for something. He was waiting for Sonia. He saw that they were parting and that Sonia was going home. Home? Where? I've seen that face somewhere, he thought. I must find out. At the turning he crossed over, looked round, and saw Sonia coming the same way, noticing nothing. She turned the corner. He followed her on. The other side. After about 50 paces he crossed over again, overtook her and kept 2 or 3 yards behind her. He was a man about 50, rather tall and thickly set, with broad high shoulders which made him look as though he stooped a little. He wore good and fashionable clothes, and looked like a gentleman of position. He carried a handsome cane, which he tapped on the pavement at each step. His gloves were spotless. He had a broad, rather pleasant face with high cheekbones and a fresh color, not often seen in Petersburg. His flaxen hair was still abundant, and only touched here and there with gray, and his thick square beard was even lighter than his hair. His eyes were blue and had a cold and thoughtful look. His lips were crimson. He was a remarkably well-preserved man, and looked much younger than his years. When Sonia came out on the canal bank, they were the only 2 persons on the pavement. He observed her dreaminess and preoccupation. On reaching the house where she lodged, Sonia turned at the gate. He followed her, seeming rather surprised. In the courtyard she turned to the right corner. "Bah!" muttered the unknown gentleman, and mounted the stairs behind her. Only then Sonia noticed him. She reached the 3rd story, turned down the passage, and rang at number 9. On the door was inscribed in chalk, "Capernaum Tailor." "Bah!" the stranger repeated again, wondering at the strange coincidence, and he rang next door at number 8. The doors were 2 or 3 yards apart. "You lodge at Capernaum's," he said, looking at Sonia and laughing. "He altered a waistcoat for me yesterday. I am staying close here at Madame Reslich's." "How odd." Sonia looked at him attentively. "We are neighbors," he went on gaily. "I only came to town the day before yesterday. Goodbye for the present." Sonia made no reply. The door opened, and she slipped in. She felt for some reason ashamed and uneasy. On the way to Porfiry's, Razumihin was obviously excited. "That's capital, brother," he repeated several times. "And I am glad. What are you glad about?" Raskolnikov thought to himself, "I didn't know that you pledged things at the old woman's, too. And was it long ago? I mean, was it long since you were there? What a simple-hearted fool he is. When was it?" Raskolnikov stopped still to recollect. 2 or 3 days before her death it must have been. "But I am not going to redeem the things now," he put in with a sort of hurried and conspicuous solicitude about the things. "I've not more than a silver rouble left, after last night's accursed delirium." He laid special emphasis on the delirium. Yes. Razumihin hastened to agree with what was not clear. "Then that's why you were stuck. Partly, you know, in your delirium you were continually mentioning some rings or chains." Yes, that's clear. It's all clear now." Hello. How that idea must have got about among them. Here this man will go to the stake for me, and I find him delighted at having it cleared up why I spoke of rings in my delirium. What a hold the idea must have on all of them. "Shall we find him?" he asked suddenly. "Oh, yes." Razumihin answered quickly. "He is a nice fellow, you will see, brother. Rather clumsy. That is to say, he is a man of polished manners, but I mean clumsy in a different sense. He is an intelligent fellow, very much so indeed, but he has his own range of ideas. He is incredulous, skeptical, cynical. He likes to impose on people, or rather to make fun of them. His is the old circumstantial method, but he understands his work thoroughly. Last year, he cleared up a case of murder in which the police had hardly a clue. He is very, very anxious to make your acquaintance. On what grounds is he so anxious? Oh, it's not exactly, you see, since you've been ill, I happen to have mentioned you several times. So, when he heard about your being a law student and not able to finish your studies, he said, "What a pity." And so I concluded from everything together, not only that, yesterday Zametov, Rodia, I talked some nonsense on the way home to you yesterday when I was drunk. I am afraid, brother, of your exaggerating it. You see. What? That they think I am a madman? Maybe they are right, he said with constrained smile. Yes, yes. That is, pooh, no. But all that I said, and there was something else too, it was all nonsense, drunken. Nonsense. But why are you apologizing? I am so sick of it all. Raskolnikov cried with exaggerated irritability. It was partly assumed, however. I know, I understand. Believe me, I understand. One's ashamed to speak of it. If you are ashamed, then don't speak of it. Both were silent. Razumin was more than ecstatic, and Raskolnikov perceived it with repulsion. He was alarmed, too, by what Razumin had just said about Porfiry. I shall have to pull a long face with him, too, he thought with a beating heart, and he turned white, and do it naturally, too. But the most natural thing would be to do nothing at all. Carefully do nothing at all. No, carefully would not be natural again. Oh, well, we shall see how it turns out. We shall see directly. Is it a good thing to go or not? The butterfly flies to the light. My heart is beating. That's what's bad. In this gray house, said Razumihin, the most important thing, does Porfiry know that I was at the old hag's flat yesterday and asked about the blood? I must find that out instantly. As soon as I go in, find out from his face. Otherwise, I'll find out if it's my ruin. I say, brother, he said suddenly, addressing Razumihin with a sly smile, I have been noticing all day that you seem to be curiously excited. Isn't it so? Excited? Not a bit of it, said Razumihin, stung to the quick. Yes, brother, I assure you it's noticeable. Why? You sat on your chair in a way you never do sit, on the edge somehow, and you seemed to be writhing all the time. You kept jumping up for nothing. One moment you were angry, and the next your face looked like a sweetmeat. You even blushed, especially when you were invited to dinner. You blushed awfully. Nothing of the sort. Nonsense. What do you mean? But why are you wriggling out of it, like a schoolboy? By Jove, there he's blushing again. What a pig you are. But why are you so shamefaced about it? Romeo, stay. I'll tell you today. Ha ha ha. I'll make mother laugh. And someone else too. Listen, listen, listen. This is serious. What next, you fiend? Razumin was utterly overwhelmed, turning cold with horror. What will you tell them? Come, brother. Phoo! What a pig you are. You are like a summer rose. And if only you knew how it suits you. A Romeo over 6 foot high. And how you wash today. You cleaned your nails, I declare. That's something unheard of. Why? I do believe you've got pomatum on your hair. Bend down. Pig. Raskolnikov laughed, as though he could not restrain himself. So, laughing, they entered Porfiry Petrovitch's flat. This is what Raskolnikov wanted. From within they could be heard laughing as they came in, still guffawing in the passage. Not a word here, or I'll brain you. Razumihin whispered furiously, seizing Raskolnikov by the shoulder. Chapter 5. Raskolnikov was already entering the room. He came in looking as though he had the utmost difficulty not to burst. Out laughing again. Behind him Razumihin strode in gawky and awkward, shamefaced and red as a peony, with an utterly crestfallen and ferocious expression. His face and whole figure really were ridiculous at that moment, and amply justified Raskolnikov's laughter. Raskolnikov, not waiting for an introduction, bowed to Porfiry Petrovitch, who stood in the middle of the room looking inquiringly at them. He held out his hand and shook hands, still apparently making desperate efforts to subdue his mirth and utter a few words to introduce himself. But he had no sooner succeeded in assuming a serious air and muttering something, when he suddenly glanced again as though accidentally at Razumihin, and could no longer control himself. His stifled laughter broke out the more irresistibly the more he tried to restrain it. The extraordinary ferocity with which Razumihin received this spontaneous mirth gave the whole scene the appearance of most genuine fun and naturalness. Razumihin strengthened this impression as though on purpose. "Fool! You fiend!" he roared, waving his arm, which at once struck a little round table with an empty tea-glass on it. Everything was sent flying and crashing. "But why break chairs, gentlemen? You know it's a loss to the crown," Porfiry Petrovitch quoted gaily. Raskolnikov was still laughing, with his hand in Porfiry Petrovitch's, but anxious not to overdo it, awaited the right moment to put a natural end to it. Razumihin, completely put to confusion by upsetting the table and smashing the glass, gazed gloomily at the fragments, cursed, and turned sharply to the window where he stood looking out with his back to the company with a fiercely scowling countenance. Seeing nothing, Porfiry Petrovitch laughed and was ready to go on laughing, but obviously looked for explanations. Zametov had been sitting in the corner, but he rose at the visitor's entrance and was standing in expectation with a smile on his lips, though he looked with surprise and even, it seemed, incredulity at the whole scene, and at Raskolnikov with a certain embarrassment. Zametov's unexpected presence struck Raskolnikov unpleasantly. "I've got to think of that," he thought. "Excuse me, please," he began, affecting extreme embarrassment. "Raskolnikov." "Not all. Very pleasant to see you, and how pleasantly you've come in." "Why, won't he even say good morning?" Porfiry Petrovitch nodded at Razumihin. "Upon my honor, I don't know why he is in such a rage with me. I only told him as we came along that he was like Romeo, and proved it, and that was all, I think." "Pig!" ejaculated Razumihin, without turning round. "There must have been very grave grounds for it, if he is so furious at the word." Porfiry laughed. "Oh, you sharp lawyer." "Damn you all!" snapped Razumihin, and suddenly bursting out laughing himself, he went up to Porfiry with a more cheerful face, as though nothing had happened. "That'll do. We are all fools. To come to business. This is my friend Rodion Romanovitch Raskolnikov. In the first place, he has heard of you and wants to make your acquaintance, and secondly, he has a little matter of business with you." "Bah! Zametov, what brought you here? Have you met before? Have you known each other long?" "What does this mean?" thought Raskolnikov uneasily. Zametov seemed taken aback, but not very much so. "Why, it was at your rooms we met yesterday," he said easily. "Then I have been spared the trouble. All last week he was begging me to introduce him to you. Porfiry and you have sniffed each other out without me. Where's your tobacco?" Porfiry Petrovitch was wearing a dressing gown, very clean linen, and trodden-down slippers. He was a man of about 35, short, stout even to corpulence, and clean-shaven. He wore his hair cut short and had a large round head, particularly prominent at the back. His soft, round, rather snub-nosed face was a sickly yellowish color, but had a vigorous and rather ironical expression. It would have been good-natured except for a look in the eyes, which shone with a watery, mawkish light under almost white, blinking eyelashes. The expression of those eyes was strangely out of keeping with his somewhat womanish figure, and gave it something far more serious than could be guessed at first sight. As soon as Porfiry Petrovitch heard that his visitor had a little matter of business with him, he begged him to sit down on the sofa, and sat down himself on the other end, waiting for him to explain his business, with that careful and over-serious attention which is at once oppressive and embarrassing, especially to a stranger, and especially if what you are discussing is, in your opinion, of far too little importance for such exceptional solemnity. But in brief and coherent phrases Raskolnikov explained his business clearly and exactly, and was so well satisfied with himself that he even succeeded in taking a good look at Porfiry. Porfiry Petrovitch did not once take his eyes off him. Razumihin, sitting opposite at the same table, listened warmly and impatiently, looking from one to the other every moment with rather excessive interest. "Fool! Raskolnikov swore to himself. You have to give information to police, Porfiry replied, with a most businesslike air. That having learned of this incident, that is of the murder, you beg to inform the lawyer in charge of the case that such and such things belong to you, and that you desire to redeem them, but they will write to you. That's just the point, that at the present moment, Raskolnikov tried his utmost to feign embarrassment. I am not quite in funds, and even this trifling sum is beyond me. I only wanted, you see, for the president to declare that the things are mine, and that when I have money, that's no matter, answered Porfiry Petrovitch, receiving his explanation of his pecuniary position coldly. But you can, if you prefer, write straight to me, too. Say that having been informed of the matter, and claiming such and such as your property, you beg, on an ordinary sheet of paper, Raskolnikov interrupted eagerly, again interested in the financial side of the question. Oh, the most ordinary, and suddenly Porfiry Petrovitch looked with obvious irony at him, screwing up his eyes and, as it were, winking at him. But perhaps it was Raskolnikov's fancy, for it all lasted but a moment. There was certainly something of the sort. Raskolnikov could have sworn he winked at him, goodness knows why. He knows. Flashed through his mind like lightning. Forgive my troubling you about such trifles, he went on, a little disconcerted. The things are only worth 5 rubles, but I prize them particularly for the sake of those from whom they came to me, and I must confess I was alarmed when I heard. That's why you were so much struck when I mentioned to Zosimov that Porfiry was inquiring for everyone who had pledges. Razumihin put in with obvious intention. This was really unbearable. Raskolnikov could not help glancing at him with a flash of vindictive anger in his black eyes, but immediately recollected himself. You seem to be jeering at me, brother, he said to him, with a well-feigned irritability. I dare say I do seem to you absurdly anxious about such trash, but you mustn't think me selfish or grasping for that, and these 2 things may be anything but trash in my eyes. I told you just now that the silver watch, though it's not worth a cent, is the only thing left us of my father's. You may laugh at me, but my mother is here. He turned suddenly to Porfiry, and if she knew, he turned again hurriedly to Razumihin, carefully making his voice tremble, that the watch was lost, she would be in despair. You know what women are. Not a bit of it. I didn't mean that at all. Quite the contrary, shouted Razumihin, distressed. Was it right? Was it natural? Did I overdo it? Raskolnikov asked himself, in a tremor. Why did I say that about women? Oh, your mother is with you? Porfiry Petrovitch inquired. Yes. When did she come? Last night. Porfiry paused as though reflecting. Your things would not in any case be lost, he went on calmly and coldly. I have been expecting you here for some time. And as though that was a matter of no importance, he carefully offered the ashtray to Razumihin, who was ruthlessly scattering cigarette ash over the carpet. Raskolnikov shuddered, but Porfiry did not seem to be looking at him, and was still concerned with Razumihin's cigarette. What? Expecting him? Why? Did you know that he had pledges there? Cried Razumihin. Porfiry Petrovitch addressed himself to Raskolnikov. Your things, the ring and the watch, were wrapped up together, and on the paper your name was legibly written in pencil, together with the date on which you left them with her. How observant you are! Raskolnikov smiled awkwardly, doing his very utmost to look him straight in the face, but he failed, and suddenly added, I say that because I suppose there were a great many pledges, that it must be difficult to remember them all. But you remember them all so clearly, and stupid, feeble, he thought. Why did I add that? But we know all who had pledges, and you are the only one who hasn't come forward. Porfiry answered with hardly perceptible irony. I haven't been quite well. I heard that, too. I heard, indeed, that you were in great distress about something. You look pale still. I am not pale at all. No, I am quite well. Raskolnikov snapped out rudely and angrily, completely changing his tone. His anger was mounting. He could not repress it. And in my anger I shall betray myself. Flashed through his mind again. Why are they torturing me? Not quite well. Razumihin caught him up. What next? He was unconscious and delirious all yesterday. Would you believe, Porfiry, as soon as our backs were turned, He dressed, though he could hardly stand, and gave us the slip and went off on a spree somewhere till midnight, delirious all the time. Would you believe it? Extraordinary. Really delirious? You don't say so. Porphyry shook his head in a womanish way. Nonsense. Don't you believe it? But you don't believe it anyway. Raskolnikov let slip in his anger, but Porphyry Petrovitch did not seem to catch those strange words. But how could you have gone out if you hadn't been delirious? Razumihin got hot suddenly. What did you go out for? What was the object of it? And why on the sly? Were you in your senses when you did it? Now that all danger is over, I can speak plainly. I was awfully sick of them yesterday. Raskolnikov addressed Porphyry suddenly with a smile of insolent defiance. I ran away from them to take lodgings where they wouldn't find me, and took a lot of money with me. Mr. Zametov there saw it. I say, Mr. Zametov, was I sensible or delirious yesterday? Settle our dispute. He could have strangled Zametov at that moment. So hateful were his expression and his silence to him. In my opinion, you talked sensibly and even artfully, but you were extremely irritable, Zametov pronounced dryly. And Nikodym Fomitch was telling me today, put in Porphyry Petrovitch, that he met you very late last night in the lodging of a man who had been run over. And there, said Razumihin, weren't you mad then? You gave your last penny to the widow for the funeral. If you wanted to help, give 15 or 20 even, but keep 3 rubles for yourself at least. But he flung away all the 25 at once. Maybe I found a treasure somewhere and you know nothing of it? So that's why I was liberal yesterday. Mr. Zametov knows I found a treasure. Excuse us, please, for disturbing you for half an hour with such trivialities, he said, turning to Porphyry Petrovitch, with trembling lips. We are boring you, aren't we? Oh, no. Quite the contrary, quite the contrary. If only you knew how you interest me. It's interesting to look on and listen, and I am really glad you have come forward at last. But you might give us some tea. My throat's dry, cried Razumihin. Capital idea. Perhaps we will all keep you company. Wouldn't you like something more essential before tea? Get along with you. Porphyry Petrovitch went out to order tea. Raskolnikov's thoughts were in a whirl. He was in terrible exasperation. The worst of it is they don't disguise it. They don't care to stand on ceremony. And how, if you didn't know me at all, did you come and talk to Nikodym Fomitch about me? So they don't care to hide that they are tracking me like a pack of dogs. They simply spit in my face. He was shaking with rage. Come, strike me openly. Don't play with me like a cat with a mouse. It's hardly civil, Porphyry Petrovitch, but perhaps I won't allow it. I shall get up and throw the whole truth in your ugly faces, and you'll see how I despise you. He could hardly breathe. And what if it's only my fancy? What if I am mistaken, and through inexperience I get angry and don't keep up my nasty part? Perhaps it's all unintentional. All their phrases are the usual ones, but there is something about them. It all might be said, but there is something. Why did he say bluntly, with her? Why did Zametov add that I spoke artfully? Why do they speak in that tone? Yes, the tone. Razumihin is sitting here. Why does he see nothing? That innocent blockhead never does see anything. Feverish again. Did Porphyry wink at me just now? Of course it's nonsense. What could he wink for? Are they trying to upset my nerves, or are they teasing me? Either it's ill fancy, or they know. Even Zametov is rude. Is Zametov rude? Zametov has changed his mind. I foresaw he would change his mind. He is at home here, while it's my first visit. Porphyry does not consider him a visitor. Sits with his back to him. They're as thick as thieves, no doubt, over me. Not a doubt they were talking about me before we came. Do they know about the flat? If only they'd make haste. When I said that I ran away to take a flat, he let it pass. I put that in cleverly about a flat. It may be of use afterwards. Delirious, indeed. Ha ha ha. He knows all about last night. He didn't know of my mother's arrival. The hag had written the date on in pencil. You are wrong. You won't catch me. There are no facts. It's all supposition. You produce facts. The flat even. Isn't a fact but delirium. I know what to say to them. Do they know about the flat? I won't go without finding out. What did I come for? But my being angry now maybe is a fact. Fool, how irritable I am. Perhaps that's right, to play the invalid. He is feeling me. He will try to catch me. Why did I come? All this flashed like lightning through his mind. Porfiry Petrovitch returned quickly. He became suddenly more jovial. Your party yesterday, brother, has left my head rather, and I am out of sorts altogether. He began in quite a different tone, laughing to Razumihin. Was it interesting? I left you yesterday at the most interesting point. Who got the best of it? Oh, no one, of course. They got on everlasting questions, floated off into space. Only fancy, Rhodia, what we got on to yesterday. Whether there is such a thing as crime. I told you that we talked our heads off. What is there strange? It's an everyday social question, Raskolnikov answered casually. The question wasn't put quite like that, observed Porfiry. Not quite, that's true. Razumin agreed at once, getting warm and hurried as usual. Listen, Rodion, and tell us your opinion. I want to hear it. I was fighting tooth and nail with them and wanted you to help me. I told them you were coming. It began with the socialist doctrine. You know their doctrine. Crime is a protest against the abnormality of the social organization, and nothing more, no other causes. Admitted. You are wrong there, cried Porfiry Petrovitch. He was noticeably animated and kept laughing as he looked at Razumihin, which made him more excited than ever. Nothing is admitted. Razumihin interrupted with heat. I am not wrong. I'll show you their pamphlets. Everything with them is the influence of environment, and nothing else. Their favorite phrase, from which it follows that if society is normally organized, all crime will cease at once, since there will be nothing to protest against, and all men will become righteous in one instant. Human nature is not taken into account. It is excluded. It's not supposed to exist. They don't recognize that humanity, developing by a historical living process, will become at last a normal society, but they believe that a social system that has come out of some mathematical brain is going to organize all humanity at once and make it just and sinless in an instant, quicker than any living process. That's why they instinctively dislike history, nothing but ugliness and stupidity in it, and they explain it all as stupidity. That's why they so dislike the living process of life. They don't want a living soul. The living soul demands life. The soul won't obey the rules of mechanics. The soul is an object of suspicion. The soul is retrograde. But what they want, though it smells of death and can be made of India rubber, at least is not alive, has no will, is servile and won't revolt. And it comes in the end to there, reducing everything to the building of walls and the planning of rooms and passages in a phalanstery. The phalanstery is ready indeed, but your human nature is not ready for phalanstery. It wants life. It hasn't completed its vital process. It's too soon for the graveyard. You can't skip over nature by logic. Logic presupposes 3 possibilities, but there are millions. Cut away 1,000,000, and reduce it all to the question of comfort. That's the easiest solution of the problem. It's seductively clear, and you mustn't think about it. That's the great thing, you mustn't think. The whole secret of life in 2 pages of print. Now he is off, beating the drum. Catch hold of him, do, laughed Porfiry. Can you imagine, he turned to Raskolnikov, 6 people holding forth like that last night, in one room, with punch as a preliminary? No, brother, you are wrong. Environment accounts for a great deal in crime. I can assure you of that. Oh, I know it does, but just tell me, a man of 40 violates a child of 10. Was environment drove him to it? Well, strictly speaking, it did. Porfiry observed with noteworthy gravity. A crime of that nature may be very well ascribed to the influence of environment. Razumihin was almost in a frenzy. Oh, if you like, he roared. I'll prove to you that your white eyelashes may very well be ascribed to the church of Ivan the Great's being 250 feet high. And I will prove it clearly, exactly, progressively, and even with a liberal tendency. I undertake to. Will you bet on it? Done. Let's hear, please, how he will prove it. He is always humbugging. Confound him, cried Razumihin, jumping up and gesticulating. What's the use of talking to you? He does all that on purpose. You don't know him, rod eye on. He took their side yesterday. Simply make fools of them. And the things he said yesterday. And they were delighted. He can keep it up for a fortnight together. Last year, he persuaded us that he was going into a monastery. He stuck to it for 2 months. Not long ago, he took it into his head to declare he was going to get married, that he had everything ready for the wedding. He ordered new clothes indeed. We all began to congratulate him. There was no bride, nothing, all pure fantasy. Ah, you are wrong. I got the clothes before. It was the new clothes, in fact, that made me think of taking you in. Are you such a good dissembler? Raskolnikov asked carelessly. You wouldn't have supposed. Wait a bit. I shall take you in, too. Ha ha ha. No, I'll tell you the truth. All these questions about crime, environment, children, recall to my mind an article of yours which interested me at the time. On crime, or something of the sort. I forget the title. I read it with pleasure 2 months ago in the Periodical Review. My article in the Periodical Review? Raskolnikov asked in astonishment. I certainly did write an article upon a book 6 months ago when I left the university, but I sent it to the Weekly Review. But it came out in the periodical. And the Weekly Review ceased to exist, so that's why it wasn't printed at the time. That's true, but when it ceased to exist, the Weekly Review was amalgamated with the periodical, and so your article appeared 2 months ago in the latter. Didn't you know? Raskolnikov had not known. Why, you might get some money out of them for the article. What a strange person you are. You lead such a solitary life that you know nothing of matters that concern you directly. It's a fact, I assure you. Bravo, Rodia. I knew nothing about it either, cried Razumin. I'll run today to the reading room and ask for the number. 2 months ago? What was the date? It doesn't matter, though. I will find it. Think of not telling us. How did you find out that the article was mine? It's only signed with an initial. I only learned it by chance the other day. Through the editor, I know him. I was very much interested. I analyzed, if I remember, the psychology of a criminal before and after crime. Yes, and you maintain that the perpetration of a crime is always accompanied by illness. Very, very original, but it was not that part of your article that interested me so much, but an idea at the end of the article which I regret to say you merely suggested without working out clearly. There is, if you recollect, a suggestion that there are certain persons who can, that is, not, precisely are able to, but have a perfect right to commit breaches of morality and crimes, and that the law is not for them. Raskolnikov smiled at the exaggerated and intentional distortion of his idea. What? What do you mean? A right to crime? But not because of the influence of environment. Razumin inquired with some alarm even. No, not exactly because of it, answered Porphyry. In his article, all men are divided into ordinary and extraordinary. Ordinary men have to live in submission, have no right to transgress the law, because, don't you see, they are ordinary. But extraordinary men have a right to commit any crime and to transgress the law in any way, just because they are extraordinary. That was your idea, if I am not mistaken. What do you mean? That can't be right. Razumihin muttered in bewilderment. Raskolnikov smiled again. He saw the point at once, and knew where they wanted to drive him. He decided to take up the challenge. That wasn't quite my contention. He began simply and modestly. Yet, I admit that you have stated it almost correctly. Perhaps, if you like, perfectly so. It almost gave him pleasure to admit this. The only difference is that I don't contend that extraordinary people are always bound to commit breaches of morals, as you call it. In fact, I doubt whether such an argument could be published. I simply hinted that an extraordinary man has a right, that is not an official right, but an inner right to decide in his own conscience to overstep certain obstacles, and only in cases essential for practical fulfillment of his idea, sometimes, perhaps, of benefit to the whole of humanity. You say that my article is indefinite. I am ready to make it as clear as I can. Perhaps I am right in thinking you want me to. Very well. I maintain that if the discoveries of Kepler and Newton could not have been made known except by sacrificing the lives of 1, 12, 100, or more men, Newton would have had the right, would indeed have been in duty bound, to eliminate the dozen or the 100 men for the sake of making his discoveries known to the whole of humanity. But it does not follow from that Newton had a right to murder people right and left and to steal every day in the market. Then I maintain in my article that legislators and leaders of men, such as Lycurgus, Solon, Muhammad, Napoleon, and so on, were all without exception criminals, from the very fact that, making a new law, they transgressed the ancient one, handed down from their ancestors and held sacred by the people, and they did not stop short at bloodshed either. If that bloodshed, often of innocent persons fighting bravely in defense of ancient law, were of use to their cause, it's remarkable, in fact, that the majority, indeed, of these benefactors and leaders of humanity were guilty of terrible carnage. In short, I maintain that all great men, or even men a little out of the common, that is to say, capable of giving some new word, must from their very nature be criminals, more or less, of course. Otherwise it's hard for them to get out of the common rut. And to remain in the common rut is what they can't submit to from their very nature again. And to my mind they ought not, indeed, to submit to it. You see that there is nothing particularly new in all that. The same thing has been printed and read 1,000 times before. As for my division of people into ordinary and extraordinary, I acknowledge that it's somewhat arbitrary, but I don't insist upon exact numbers. I only believe in my leading idea that men are in general divided by a law of nature into two categories, inferior, ordinary. That is, so to say, material that serves only to reproduce its kind, and men who have the gift or the talent to utter a new word. There are, of course, innumerable subdivisions, but the distinguishing features of both categories are fairly well marked. The first category, generally speaking, are men conservative in temperament and law-abiding. They live under control and love to be controlled. To my thinking, it is their duty to be controlled, because that's their vocation, and there is nothing humiliating in it for them. The second category all transgress the law. They are destroyers or disposed to destruction according to their capacities. The crimes of these men are, of course, relative and varied. For the most part, they seek in very varied ways the destruction of the present for the sake of the better. But if such a one is forced for the sake of his idea to step over a corpse or wade through blood, he can, I maintain, find within himself, in his conscience, a sanction for wading through blood. That depends on the idea and its dimensions. Note that. It's only in that sense I speak of their right to crime in my article. You remember it began with the legal question. There's no need for such anxiety, however. The masses will scarcely ever admit this right. They punish them or hang them, more or less, and in doing so fulfill quite justly their conservative vocation. But the same masses set these criminals on a pedestal in the next generation and worship them more or less. The first category is always the man of the present, the second the man of the future. The first preserve the world and people it. The second move the world and lead it to its goal. Each class has an equal right to exist. In fact, all have equal rights with me, and vive la Gardernel, to the New Jerusalem, of course. Then you believe in the New Jerusalem, do you? I do, Raskolnikov answered firmly. As he said these words, and during the whole preceding tirade, he kept his eyes on one spot on the carpet. And do you believe in God? Excuse my curiosity. I do, repeated Raskolnikov, raising his eyes to Porfiry. And do you believe in Lazarus rising from the dead? I do. Why do you ask all this? You believe it literally? Literally. You don't say so. I ask from curiosity. Excuse me. But let us go back to the question. They are not always executed. Some, on the contrary, triumph in their lifetime? Oh, yes. Some attain their ends in this life, and then they begin executing other people. If it's necessary, indeed, for the most part they do. Your remark is very witty. Thank you. But tell me this. How do you distinguish those extraordinary people from the ordinary ones? Are there signs at their birth? I feel there ought to be more exactitude, more external definition. Excuse the natural anxiety of a practical law-abiding citizen, but couldn't they adopt a special uniform? For instance, Couldn't they where something be branded in some way? For you know if confusion arises and a member of one category imagines that he belongs to the other, begins to eliminate obstacles, as you so happily expressed it, then, oh, that very often happens. That remark is wittier than the other. Thank you. No reason to. But take note that the mistake can only arise in the first category, that is among the ordinary people, as I perhaps unfortunately called them. In spite of their predisposition to obedience, very many of them, through a playfulness of nature, sometimes vouchsafed even to the cow, like to imagine themselves advanced people, destroyers, and to push themselves into the new movement, and this quite sincerely. Meanwhile, the really new people are very often unobserved by them, or even despised as reactionaries of groveling tendencies. But I don't think there is any considerable danger here, and you really need not be uneasy, for they never go very far. Of course, they might have a thrashing sometimes to let their fancy run away with them and to teach them their place, but no more. In fact, even this isn't necessary as they castigate themselves, for they are very conscientious. Some perform this service for one another, and others chastise themselves with their own hands. They will impose various public acts of penitence upon themselves with a beautiful and edifying effect. In fact, you've nothing to be uneasy about. It's a law of nature. Well, you've certainly set my mind more at rest on that score. But there's another thing worries me. Tell me, please, are there many people who have the right to kill others? These extraordinary people? I am ready to bow down to them, of course. But you must admit it's alarming if there are great. Many of them, Oh, you needn't worry about that either. Raskolnikov went on in the same tone. People with new ideas, people with the faintest capacity for saying something new, are extremely few in number, extraordinarily so in fact. One thing only is clear, that the appearance of all these grades and subdivisions of men must follow with unfailing regularity some law of nature. That law, of course, is unknown at present, but I am convinced that it exists and one day may become known. The vast mass of mankind is mere material, and only exists in order by some great effort, by some mysterious process, by means of some crossing of races and stocks, to bring into the world at last perhaps one man out of 1,000 with a spark of independence. 1 in 10,000 perhaps, I speak roughly, approximately, is born with some independence, and with still greater independence 1 in 100,000. The man of genius is one of millions, and the great geniuses, the crown of humanity, appear on earth perhaps 1 in many thousand millions. In fact, I have not peeped into the retort in which all this takes place. But there certainly is and must be a definite law. It cannot be a matter of chance. Why, are you both joking? Razumihin cried at last. There you sit, making fun of one another. Are you serious, Rodia? Raskolnikov raised his pale and almost mournful face and made no reply. And the unconcealed, persistent, nervous, and discourteous sarcasm of Porfiry seemed strange to Razumihin beside that quiet and mournful face. Well, brother, if you're really serious, you are right, of course, in saying that it's not new, that it's like what we've read and heard 1,000 times already. But what is really original in all this, and is exclusively your own, to my horror, is that you sanction bloodshed in the name of conscience, and, excuse my saying so, with such fanaticism. That, I take it, is the point of your article. But that sanction of bloodshed by conscience is to my mind more terrible than the official legal sanction of bloodshed. You are quite right. It is more terrible. Porfiry agreed. Yes, you must have exaggerated. There is some mistake. I shall read it. You can't think that. I shall read it. All that is not in the article. There's only a hint of it, said Raskolnikov. Yes, yes. Porfiry couldn't sit still. Your attitude to crime is pretty clear to me now, but excuse me for my impertinence. I am really ashamed to be worrying you like this. You see, you remove my anxiety as to the two grades getting mixed, but there are various practical possibilities that make me uneasy. What if some man or youth imagines that he is a Lycurgus or Mahomet, a future one, of course, and suppose he begins to remove all obstacles? He has some great enterprise before him, and needs money for it, and tries to get it. Do you see? Zametov gave a sudden guffaw in his corner. Raskolnikov did not even raise his eyes to him. I must admit, he went on calmly, that such cases certainly must arise. The vain and foolish are particularly apt to fall into that snare, young people especially. Yes, you see. Well then. What then? Raskolnikov smiled in reply. That's not my fault. So it is, and so it always will be. He said just now, he nodded at Razumihin, that I sanction bloodshed. Society is too well protected by prisons, banishment, criminal investigators, penal servitude. There's no need to be uneasy. You have but to catch the thief. And what if we do catch him? Then he gets what he deserves. You are certainly logical. But what of his conscience? Why do you care about that? Simply from humanity. If he has a conscience, he will suffer for his mistake. That will be his punishment, as well as the prison. But the real geniuses, asked Razumihin, frowning, those who have the right to murder, oughtn't they to suffer it all, even for the blood they've shed? Why the word ought? It's not a matter of permission or prohibition. He will suffer if he is sorry for his victim. Pain and suffering are always inevitable for a large intelligence and a deep heart. The really great men must, I think, have great sadness on earth, he added dreamily, not in the tone of the conversation. He raised his eyes, looked earnestly at them all, smiled, and took his cap. He was too quiet by comparison with his manner at his entrance, and he felt this. Everyone got up. Well, you may abuse me, be angry with me if you like. Porfiry Petrovitch began again, but I can't resist. Allow me one little question. I know I am troubling you. There is just one little notion I want to express, simply that I may not forget it. Very good. Tell me your little notion. Raskolnikov stood waiting, pale and grave before him. Well, you see, I really don't know how to express it properly. It's a playful, psychological idea. When you were writing your article, surely you couldn't have helped, fancying yourself, just a little, an extraordinary man, uttering a new word in your sense. That's so, isn't it? Quite possibly, Raskolnikov answered contemptuously. Razumihin made a movement. And if so, could you bring yourself in case of worldly difficulties and hardship or for some service to humanity, to overstep obstacles, for instance, to rob and murder? And again he winked with his left eye and laughed noiselessly just as before. If I did, I certainly should not tell you. Raskolnikov answered with defiant and haughty contempt. No, I was only interested on account of your article, from a literary point of view. Phoo! How obvious and insolent that is. Raskolnikov thought with repulsion. Allow me to observe, he answered dryly, that I don't consider myself a Mohammed or Napoleon, nor any person of that kind, and not being one of them I cannot tell you how I should act. Oh, come, don't we all think ourselves Napoleons now in Russia? Porfiry Petrovitch said with alarming familiarity. Something peculiar betrayed itself in the very intonation of his voice. Perhaps it was one of these future Napoleons who did for Alyona Ivanovna last week. Zaimtov blurted out from the corner. Raskolnikov did not speak, but looked firmly and intently at Porfiry. Razumihin was scowling gloomily. He seemed before this to be noticing something. He looked angrily around. There was a minute of gloomy silence. Raskolnikov turned to go. Are you going already? Porfiry said amiably, holding out his hand with excessive politeness. Very, very glad of your acquaintance. As for your request, have no uneasiness. Write just as I told you. Or, better still, come to me there yourself in a day or two. Tomorrow, indeed. I shall be there at 11 o'clock for certain. We'll arrange it all. We'll have a talk. As one of the last to be there, you might perhaps be able to tell us something, he added with a most good-natured expression. You want to cross-examine me officially in due form. Raskolnikov asked sharply. Oh, why? That's not necessary for the present. You misunderstand me. I lose no opportunity, you see, and I've talked with all who had pledges. I obtained evidence from some of them, and you are the last. Yes, by the way, he cried, seemingly suddenly delighted. I just remember, what was I thinking of? He turned to Razumihin. You're talking my ears off about that, Nikolai, of course. I know very well. He turned to Raskolnikov. That the fellow is innocent. But what is one to do? We had to trouble Dmitri, too. This is the point. This is all. When you went up the stairs, it was past 7, wasn't it? Yes, answered Raskolnikov, with an unpleasant sensation at the very moment he spoke that he need not have said it. Then when you went upstairs between 7 and 8, didn't you see in a flat that stood open on a second story? Do you remember? 2 workmen, or at least one of them. They were painting there. Didn't you notice them? It's very, very important for them. Painters? No, I didn't see them, Raskolnikov answered slowly, as though ransacking his memory, while at the same instant he was racking every nerve, almost swooning with anxiety to conjecture as quickly as possible where the trap lay and not to overlook anything. No, I didn't see them, and I don't think I noticed a flat like that open. But on the 4th story, he had mastered the trap now and was triumphant. I remember now that someone was moving out of the flat opposite Alyona Ivanovna's. I remember it clearly. Some porters were carrying out a sofa, and they squeezed me against the wall. But painters, no, I don't remember that there were any painters, and I don't think that there was a flat open anywhere. No, there wasn't. What do you mean? Razumin shouted suddenly, as though he reflected and realized. Why? It was on the day of the murder. The painters were at work, and he was there 3 days before? What are you asking? Phoo! I have muddled it. Porphyry slapped himself on the forehead. Deuce take it. This business is turning my brain, he addressed Raskolnikov somewhat apologetically. It would be such a great thing for us to find out whether anyone had seen them between 7 and 8 at the flat. So I fancied you could perhaps have told us something. I quite muddled it. Then you should be more careful, Razumin observed grimly. The last words were uttered in the passage. Porfiry Petrovitch saw them to the door with excessive politeness. They went out into the street gloomy and sullen, and for some steps they did not say a word. Raskolnikov drew a deep breath. Chapter 6. I don't believe it. I can't believe it, repeated Razumin, trying in perplexity to refute Raskolnikov's arguments. They were by now approaching Bakiev's lodgings, where Pulcheria Alexandrovna and Dunya had been expecting them a long while. Razumin kept stopping, on the way in the heat of discussion, confused and excited by the very fact that they were for the first time speaking openly about it. Don't believe it, then, answered Raskolnikov with a cold, careless smile. You were noticing nothing as usual, but I was weighing every word. You are suspicious. That is why you weighed their words. Certainly, I agree. Porfiry's tone was rather strange, and still more that wretch Zametov. You are right. There was something about him. But why? Why? He has changed his mind since last night. Quite the contrary. If they had that brainless idea, they would do their utmost to hide it and conceal their cards so as to catch you afterwards. But it was all impudent and careless. If they had facts, real facts, or at least grounds for suspicion, then they would certainly have tried to hide their game. In the hope of getting more, they would have made a search long ago besides. But they have no facts, not one. It is all mirage, all ambiguous, simply a floating idea. So they try to throw me out by impudence. And perhaps he was irritated at having no facts and blurted it out in his vexation. Or perhaps he has some plan. He seems an intelligent man. Perhaps he wanted to frighten me by pretending to know. They have a psychology of their own, brother, but it is loathsome explaining it all. Stop. And it's insulting. I understand you. But since we have spoken openly now, and it is an excellent thing that we have at last, I am glad. I will own now frankly that I noticed in them long ago this idea. Of course the merest hint only. An insinuation. But why an insinuation even? How dare they? What foundation have they? If only you knew how furious I have been. Think only. Simply because a poor student, unhinged by poverty and hypochondria, on the eve of severe delirious illness, note that, suspicious, vain, proud, who has not seen a soul to speak to for 6 months, in rags and in boots, without soles, has to face some wretched policemen and put up with their insolence, and the unexpected debt thrust under his nose, the IOU presented by Chebarov, the new paint, 30 degrees Romer, and a stifling atmosphere, a crowd of people, the talk about the murder of a person where he had been just before, and all that on an empty stomach. He might well have a fainting fit, and that is what they found it all on. Damn them. I understand how annoying it is, but in your place, Rhodia, I would laugh at them, or better still, spit in their ugly faces, and spit a dozen times in all directions. I'd hit out in all directions neatly too, and so I'd put an end to it. Damn them. Don't be downhearted. It's a shame. He really has put it well, though, Raskolnikov thought. Damn them. But the cross-examination again tomorrow, he said with bitterness. Must I really enter into explanations with them? I feel vexed as it is that I condescended to speak to Zametov yesterday. In the restaurant, damn it, I will go myself to Porfiry. I will squeeze it out of him, as one of the family. He must let me know the ins and outs of it all. And as for Zametov, at last he sees through him, thought Raskolnikov. Stay, cried Razumin, seizing him by the shoulder again. Stay. You were wrong. I have thought it out. You are wrong. How is that a trap? You say that the question about the workmen was a trap. But if you had done that, could you have said you had seen them? Painting the flat and the workmen? On the contrary, you would have seen nothing, even if you had seen it. Who would own it against himself? If I had done that thing, I should certainly have said that I had seen the workmen in the flat, Raskolnikov answered, with reluctance and obvious disgust. But why speak against yourself? Because only peasants or the most inexperienced novices deny everything flatly at examinations. If a man is ever so little developed and experienced, he will certainly try to admit all the external facts that can't be avoided, but will seek other explanations of them, will introduce some special unexpected turn that will give them another significance and put them in another light. Porfiry might well reckon that I should be sure to answer so, and say I had seen him to give an air of truth, and then make some explanation. But he would have told you at once that the workmen could not have been there 2 days before, and that therefore you must have been there on the day of the murder at 8 o'clock. And so he would have caught you over a detail. Yes, that is what he was reckoning on, that I should not have time to reflect, and should be in a hurry to make the most likely answer, and so would forget that the workmen could not have been there 2 days before. But how could you forget it? Nothing easier. It is in just such stupid things clever people are most easily caught. The more cunning a man is, the less he suspects that he will be caught in a simple thing. The more cunning a man is, the simpler the trap he must be caught in. Porfiry is not such a fool as you think. He is a knave, then, if that is so. Raskolnikov could not help laughing. But at the very moment, he was struck by the strangeness of his own frankness, and the eagerness with which he had made this explanation, though he had kept up all the preceding conversation with gloomy repulsion, obviously with motive from necessity. I am getting a relish for certain aspects, he thought to himself. But almost at the same instant, he became suddenly uneasy, as though an unexpected and alarming idea had occurred to him. His uneasiness kept on increasing. They had just reached the entrance to Bakleyev's. Go in alone, said Raskolnikov suddenly. I will be back directly. Where are you going? Why, we are just here. I can't help it. I will come in half an hour. Tell them. Say what you like. I will come with you. You, too, want to torture me, he screamed, with such bitter irritation, such despair in his eyes that Razumihin's hands dropped. He stood for some time on the steps, looking gloomily at Raskolnikov striding rapidly away in the direction of his lodging. At last, gritting his teeth and clenching his fist, he swore he would squeeze Porfiry like a lemon that very day, and went up the stairs to reassure Pulcheria Alexandrovna, who was by now alarmed at their long absence. When Raskolnikov got home, his hair was soaked with sweat, and he was breathing heavily. He went rapidly up the stairs, walked into his unlocked room, and at once fastened the latch. Then in senseless terror he rushed to the corner, to that hole under the paper where he had put the things, put his hand in, and for some minutes felt careful in the hole, in every crack and fold of the paper. Finding nothing, he got up and drew a deep breath. As he was reaching the steps of Bakleyev's, he suddenly fancied that something, a chain, a stud, or even a bit of paper in which they had been wrapped with the old woman's handwriting on it, might somehow have slipped out and been lost in some crack, and then might suddenly turn up as unexpected, conclusive evidence against him. He stood as though lost in thought, and a strange, humiliated, half-senseless smile strayed on his lips. He took his cap at last and went quietly out of the room. His ideas were all tangled. He went dreamily through the gateway. Here he is himself. Shouted a loud voice. He raised his head. The porter was standing at the door of his little room and was pointing him out to a short man who looked like an artisan, wearing a long coat and a waistcoat, and looking at a distance remarkably like a woman. He stooped, and his head in a greasy cap hung forward. From his wrinkled, flabby face, he looked over 50. His little eyes were lost in fat, and they looked out grimly, sternly and discontentedly. "What is it?" Raskolnikov asked, going up to the porter. The man stole a look at him from under his brows, and he looked at him attentively, deliberately. Then he turned slowly and went out of the gate into the street without saying a word. "What is it?" cried Raskolnikov. "Why?" Fyodor was asking whether a student lived here. "Mention your name and whom you lodge with. I saw you coming and pointed you out, and he went away. It's funny." The porter, too, seemed rather puzzled, but not much so, and after wondering for a moment, he turned and went back to his room. Raskolnikov ran after the stranger, and at once caught sight of him walking along the other side of the street with the same even, deliberate step with his eyes fixed on the ground, as though in meditation. He soon overtook him, but for some time walked behind him. At last, moving on to a level with him, he looked at his face. The man noticed him at once, looked at him quickly, but dropped his eyes again, and so they walked for a minute side by side, without uttering a word. "You were inquiring for me of the porter?" Raskolnikov said at last, but in a curiously quiet voice. The man made no answer. He didn't even look at him. Again they were both silent. "Why do you come and ask for me and say nothing? What's the meaning of it?" Raskolnikov's voice broke, and he seemed unable to articulate the words clearly. The man raised his eyes this time, and turned a gloomy, sinister look at Raskolnikov. "Murderer!" he said suddenly in a quiet but clear and distinct voice. Raskolnikov went on walking beside him. His legs felt suddenly weak. A cold shiver ran down his spine, and his heart seemed to stand still for a moment, then suddenly began throbbing as though it were set free. So they walked for about 100 paces, side by side in silence. The man did not look at him. "What do you mean? What is—" "Who is a murderer?" muttered Raskolnikov hardly audibly. "You are a murderer." The man answered still more articulately and emphatically, with a smile of triumphant hatred, and again he looked straight into Raskolnikov's pale face and stricken eyes. They had just reached the crossroads. The man turned to the left without looking behind him. Raskolnikov remained standing, gazing after him. He saw him turn round 50 paces away, and looked back at him still standing there. Raskolnikov could not see clearly, but he fancied that he was again smiling the same smile of cold hatred and triumph. With slow, faltering steps, with shaking knees, Raskolnikov made his way back to his little garret, feeling chilled all over. He took off his cap and put it on the table, and for 10 minutes he stood without moving. Then he sank exhausted on the sofa, and with a weak moan of pain he stretched himself on it. So he lay for half an hour. He thought of nothing. Some thoughts or fragment of thoughts, some images without order or coherence floated before his mind. Faces of people he had seen in his childhood or met somewhere once, whom he would never have. Recalled the belfry of the church at V, the billiard table in a restaurant and some officers playing billiards, the smell of cigars in some underground tobacco shop, a tavern room, a back staircase quite dark, all sloppy with dirty water and strewn with eggshells, and the Sunday bells floating in from somewhere. The images followed one another, whirling like a hurricane. Some of them he liked and tried to clutch at, but they faded, and all the while there was an impression within him. But it was not overwhelming. Sometimes it was even pleasant. The slight shivering still persisted, but that too was an almost pleasant sensation. He heard the hurried footsteps of Razumihin. He closed his eyes and pretended to be asleep. Razumihin opened the door and stood for some time in the doorway as though hesitating. Then he stepped softly into the room and went cautiously to the sofa. Raskolnikov heard Nastasia's whisper, "Don't disturb him. Let him sleep. He can have his dinner later." "Quite so," answered Razumihin. Both withdrew carefully and closed the door. Another half-hour passed. Raskolnikov opened his eyes, turned on his back again, clasping his hands behind his head. Who is he? Who is that man who sprang out of the earth? Where was he? What did he see? He has seen it all. That's clear. Where was he then? And from where did he see? Why has he only now sprung out of the earth? And how could he see? Is it possible? H.M., continued Raskolnikov, turning cold and shivering. And the jewel case Nikolai found behind the door, was that possible? A clue? You miss an infinitesimal line, and you can build it into a pyramid of evidence. A fly flew by and saw it. Is it possible? He felt with sudden loathing how weak, how physically weak he had become. I ought to have known it, he thought with a bitter smile. And how dared I, knowing myself, knowing how I should be, take up an axe and shed blood? I ought to have known beforehand. But I didn't know, he whispered in despair. At times he came to a standstill at some thought. No, those men are not made so. The real master to whom all is permitted storms to loan makes a massacre in Paris, forgets an army in Egypt, wastes 500,000 men in the Moscow expedition, and gets off with a jest at Vilna. And altars are set up to him after his death, and so all is permitted. No, such people, it seems, are not of flesh but of bronze. One sudden irrelevant idea almost made him laugh. Napoleon, the pyramids, Waterloo, and a wretched skinny old woman, a pawnbroker with a red trunk under her bed. It's a nice hash for Porfiry Petrovitch to digest. How can they digest it? It's too inartistic. A Napoleon creep under an old woman's bed. Ugh, how loathsome. At moments he felt he was raving. He sank into a state of feverish excitement. The old woman is of no consequence, he thought, hotly and incoherently. The old woman was a mistake, perhaps, but she is not what matters. The old woman was only an illness. I was in a hurry to overstep. I didn't kill a human being, but a principle. I killed the principle, but I didn't overstep. I stopped on this side. I was only capable of killing, and it seems I wasn't even capable of that. Principle? Why was that fool Razumihin abusing the socialists? They're industrious, commercial people. The happiness of all is their case. No, life is only given to me once, and I shall never have it again. I don't want to wait for the happiness of all. I want to live myself, or else better not live at all. I simply couldn't pass by my mother starving, keeping my ruble in my pocket while I waited for the happiness of all. I am putting my little brick into the happiness of all, and so my heart is at peace. Ha! Why have you let me slip? I only live once. I too want. Eck, I am an aesthetic louse and nothing more, he added suddenly, laughing like a madman. Yes, I am certainly a louse, he went on, clutching the idea, gloating over it and playing with it with vindictive pleasure. In the first place, because I can reason that I am one, and secondly, because for a month past I've been troubling benevolent Providence, calling it to witness that not for my own fleshly lust did I undertake it, but with a grand and noble object. Ha! Thirdly, because I aimed at carrying it out as justly as possible, weighing, measuring, and calculating. Of all the lice I picked out the most useless one and proposed to take from her. Only as much as I needed for first step, no more nor less. So the rest would have gone to a monastery, according to her will. Ha! And what shows that I am utterly a louse, he added, grinding his teeth, is that I am perhaps viler and more loathsome than the louse I killed, and I felt beforehand that I should tell myself so after killing her. Can anything be compared with the horror of that? The vulgarity, the abjectness. I understand the prophet with his saber on his steed. Allah commands, and trembling creation must obey. The prophet is right. He is right when he set the battery across the street and blows up the innocent and the guilty without deigning to explain. It's for you to obey, trembling creation, and not to have desires, for that's not for you. I shall never forgive the old woman. His hair was soaked with sweat. His quivering lips were parched. His eyes were fixed on the ceiling. Mother, sister, how I love them. Why do I hate them now? Yes, I hate them. I feel a physical hatred for them. I can't bear them near me. I went up to my mother and kissed her. I remember to embrace her, and think if she only knew. Shall I tell her then? That's just what I might do. She must be the same as I am, he added, straining himself to think, as it were struggling with delirium. Ah, how I hate the old woman now. I feel I should kill her again if she came to life. Poor Lizaveta. Why did she come in? It's strange, though, why is it I scarcely ever think of her, as though I hadn't killed her? Lizaveta, Sonia, poor gentle things, with gentle eyes. Dear women, why don't they weep? Why don't they moan? They give up everything. Their eyes are soft and gentle. Sonia, Sonia, gentle Sonia. He lost consciousness. It seemed strange to him that he didn't remember how he got into the street. It was late evening. The twilight had fallen, and the full moon was shining more and more brightly. But there was a peculiar breathlessness in the air. There were crowds of people in the street. Workmen and business people were making their way home. Other people had come out for a walk. There was a smell of mortar, dust, and stagnant water. Raskolnikov walked along, mournful and anxious. He was distinctly aware of having come out with a purpose, of having to do something in a hurry, but what it was he had forgotten. Suddenly he stood still and saw a man standing on the other side of the street, beckoning to him. He crossed over to him, but at once the man turned and walked away with his head hanging, as though he had made no sign to him. Stay, did he really beckon? Raskolnikov wondered, but he tried to overtake him. When he was within 10 paces, he recognized him and was frightened. It was the same man with stooping shoulders and the long coat. Raskolnikov followed him at a distance. His heart was beating. They went down a turning. The man still did not look round. Does he know I am following him? Thought Raskolnikov. The man went into the gateway of a big house. Raskolnikov hastened to the gate and looked in to see whether he would look round and sign to him. In the courtyard the man did turn round, and again seemed to beckon him. Raskolnikov at once followed him into the yard, but the man was gone. He must have gone up the first staircase. Raskolnikov rushed after him. He heard slow measured steps 2 flights above. The staircase seemed strangely familiar. He reached the window on the first floor. The moon shone through the panes with melancholy and mysterious light. Then he reached the second floor. Bah! This is a flat where the painters were at work. But how was it he did not recognize it at once? The steps of the man above had died away, so he must have stopped or hidden somewhere. He reached the 3rd story. Should he go on? There was a stillness that was dreadful. But he went on. The sound of his own footsteps scared and frightened him. How dark it was. The man must be hiding in some corner here. Ah! The flat was standing wide open. He hesitated and went in. It was very dark and empty in the passage, as though everything had been removed. He crept on tiptoe into the parlor, which was flooded with moonlight. Everything there was as before, the chairs, the looking-glass, the yellow sofa, and the pictures in the frames. A huge, round, copper-red moon looked in at the windows. It's the moon that makes it so still, weaving some mystery, thought Raskolnikov. He stood and waited a long while, and the more silent the moonlight, the more violently his heart beat, till it was painful, and still the same hush. Suddenly he heard a momentary sharp crack, like the snapping of a splinter, and all was still again. A fly flew up suddenly and struck the window pane with a plaintive buzz. At that moment he noticed in the corner between the window and the little cupboard something like a cloak hanging on the wall. Why is that cloak here? He thought, it wasn't there before. He went up to it quietly and felt that there was someone hiding behind it. He cautiously moved the cloak and saw, sitting on a chair in the corner, the old woman bent double, so that he couldn't see her face. But it was she. He stood over her. She is afraid, he thought. He stealthily took the axe from a noose and struck her one blow, then another on the skull. But strange to say, she did not stir, as though she were made of wood. He was frightened, bent down nearer and tried to look at her, but she, too, bent her head lower. He bent right down to the ground and peeped up into her face from below. He peeped and turned cold with horror. The old woman was sitting and laughing, shaking with noiseless laughter, doing her utmost that he should not hear it. Suddenly he fancied that the door from the bedroom was open a little, and that there was laughter and whispering within. He was overcome with frenzy, and he began hitting the old woman on the head with all his force. But every blow of the axe, the laughter and whispering from the bedroom grew louder, and the old woman was simply shaking with mirth. He was rushing away. But the passage was full of people. The doors of the flat stood open, and on the landing, on the stairs, and everywhere below there were people, rows of heads, all looking, but huddled together in silence and expectation. Something gripped his heart. His legs were rooted to the spot. They would not move. He tried to scream and woke up. He drew a deep breath, but his dream seemed strangely to persist. His door was flung open, and a man whom he had never seen stood in the doorway watching him intently. Raskolnikov had hardly opened his eyes, and he instantly closed them again. He lay on his back without stirring. Is it still a dream? He wondered, and again raised his eyelids hardly perceptibly. The stranger was standing in the same place, still watching him. He stepped cautiously into the room, carefully, closing the door after him, went up to the table, paused a moment, still keeping his eyes on Raskolnikov, and noiselessly seated himself on the chair by the sofa. He put his hat on the floor beside him and leaned his hands on his cane and his chin on his hands. It was evident that he was prepared to wait indefinitely. As far as Raskolnikov could make out from his stolen glances, he was a man no longer young, stout, with a full, fair, almost whitish beard. 10 minutes passed. It was still light, but beginning to get dusk. There was complete stillness in the room. Not a sound came from the stairs. Only a big fly buzzed and fluttered against the window pane. It was unbearable at last. Raskolnikov suddenly got up and sat on the sofa. "Come, tell me what you want." "I knew you were not asleep, but only pretending," the stranger answered oddly, laughing calmly. "Arkady Ivanovitch Svidrigailov, allow me to introduce myself. Part 3 ends here. We will meet again in Part 4. Share your thoughts in the comments, and let us know how you enjoyed this part. Thank you for listening.